Warrior Lore. Chapter 3553. The immortal slaying crossbow used by the soldiers of the Bronze Pillar State was a sharp weapon used by Confucian cultivators against the Taoist sect. Even the well-trained Taoist soldiers of the Taoist sect would not be able to withstand it, let alone the family generals of the Confucian aristocratic families. Once they came into contact with the crossbow, from the initial scream, the heart-wrenching howls could be heard incessantly. The family generals of the Zhu family really did not want to scream, but the immortal slaying crossbow was too overbearing. When the arrow flew past, it definitely pierced through their bodies and came out of their backs with flesh and blood. The absolute pain was truly heart-wrenching. They had no choice but to open their mouths. Boom. Elder Xian was stunned, but he felt a gust of wind roaring in front of him. He hurriedly looked up and saw a black shadow with hundreds of inscriptions in it. They seemed to be chasing after his life. As it roared, it had already rushed in front of his face. Elder Xian opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of genuine qi. Several streams of noble qi blasted down at the same time. It was like a giant hand blocking in front of him, barely pulling the arrow away. Whoosh! With a soft sound, the immortal slaying crossbow flew past Elder Xian's ear, and a few strands of his white hair fell to the ground. How can they rush into the Jade Mountain? Elder Xian had already weighed the pros and cons in a moment. He knew that it was impossible to rush through the alliance in this situation, so he hurriedly ordered a retreat. However, the urgency of the situation was far beyond his imagination. Clang! A golden sound came from about 100 feet below him. The sound was so resounding and so frightening. A gust of wind appeared out of nowhere. Elder Xian's noble qi was instantly sucked out of his body. A kind of coldness and an ice demon pounced from under his feet like a ferocious beast. God-slaying bow. Elder Xian's heart immediately turned cold. He had long heard of the weapon used by the Bronze Pillar State to deal with the Taoist generals of the Taoist sect, but he had never thought that one day he would face it alone. Elder Xian's genuine qi was forced to solidify by the god-slaying bow's ferociousness. He felt his bones and tendons go numb, and an irresistible fear rose in his heart. Before he could wave his weapon or take out his scroll and other things, a cold light flashed in the night sky. A 3-meter-long arrow pierced Elder Xian's heart with lightning speed. Elder Xian's body was like a doll. He was sent flying dozens of feet before he landed in an arc in the distance. Boom! The sound came from being nailed to an ancient tree. The ancient tree trembled, and many leaves fell. The old and hunched figure curled up into a ball, and blood flowed out of his mouth like a fountain. He lifted his grayish-white eyes with great difficulty to look in young Master Zhu's direction. Then, he immediately closed his eyes, and his entire body was nailed to the ancient tree. Roar! Roar! In the distance, Elder Xian faced dozens of black armor soldiers who were shouting slogans. Their genuine qi was activated as they worked together to control a crossbow that was dozens of feet long. The crossbow was pitch black, and the thousands of inscriptions on it flashed blood red. It flowed even more violently than the blood on Elder Xian's chest. Boom, boom, boom. A total of 3 similar god-slaying bows roared from the rocks near Qinyu Mountain. 3 arrows as thick as a child's arm shot into the air. A faint light flashed, and strings of blood splattered. Dao Hong covered his left shoulder and revealed himself in the air. There was a look of disbelief in his eyes. He could not believe that his invisibility talisman had been seen through by the Confucian cultivator. Taoist remnant. Behind him, at the edge of the camp, a burly general dressed in battle armor and riding a pitch-black steed appeared. The general roared, "I've been waiting for you here for a long time. My sons. Kill. General. General Hao who? How? How is this possible?" Dao Hong seemed to be very familiar with the generals of the Bronze Pillar country. He almost blurted it out. He really did not expect that General Hao who, one of the 3 great generals of the Bronze Pillar country, would personally come to Qinyu Mountain to guard it. A sense of dizziness, as if he had fallen into an abyss, instantly arose from the bottom of Dao Hong's heart. However, the difficulty of the situation was beyond Dao Hong's expectations. Clang, clang, clang. At the same time, The sound of the gods slaying bows rang out behind him, where Chinyu Mountain was surrounded by black water. In an instant, goosebumps appeared all over Dao Hong's body. Almost without hesitation, he slapped his hand on the top of his head and a bronze ring flew out. The ring buzzed as it flew out. Rays of bronze luster appeared from the ring and covered Dao Hong's body in the air. Boom, boom, boom. As soon as the luster fell, 3 arrows rushed to Dao Hong's side. In the loud roar, thousands of inscriptions appeared between the arrows and the ring. The bronze luster turned into fist-sized bubbles, which then burst like ants. Wisps of noble spirit, sharper than knives, pierced into the luster and tore it into pieces. Then, the 3 flying arrows rushed into the ring. Fortunately, after being blocked by Dao Hong's magical weapon, the 3 flying arrows had lost a lot of their strength. Dao Hong was still agile and managed to dodge the god-slaying bows in a flash. Having narrowly escaped death, Dao Hong no longer dared to fly in the air. His body descended rapidly like a falling meteor. Before his body could land on the ground, boom, boom. Several beams of light shot out from the halo and struck 4 to 5 soldiers who were activating the immortal extermination crossbows. How could these soldiers be a match for Dao Hong? In an instant, they were turned into minced meat and scattered all over the ground. Damn it! Seeing that Dao Hong had killed several black armored soldiers and was about to enter the camp, General Hao Hu was enraged. With a furious roar, he leapt up from his black horse. Stepping on a cloud, he charged towards Dao Hong like a ferocious tiger. While General Hao Hu was still in the air, his fists and legs were already dancing. Wisps of noble spirit fell, and the wind from his fists whistled. The soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were blown into the air. The tents beside the soldiers were instantly torn into pieces. Before Dao Hong could hide into the crowd, he hastily formed an incantation gesture. Amidst the vibrating sound of the bronze brilliance, a huge shadow flew out and charged towards General Hao Hu. It collided with the wind generated by General Hao Hu's fist. Boom! A powerful force spread in all directions. The soldiers several dozen feet to the left were sent flying. The immortal execution crossbows that had just been set up were also scattered by the impact. Woo-woo! While Dao Hong was still rolling in the air, 2 more god-slaying bows came at him. Dao Hong knew that his protective golden light couldn't block the god-slaying bows. As he lost his balance, he immediately broke the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of essence blood on the bronze bracelet. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The bronze bracelet's luster soared into the sky like a waterfall. While protecting Dao Hong, it blocked the 2 flying arrows. Humph! General Hao Hu, who was in the air, let out a cold snort. His feet swept across the air. His palms shook slightly as though he was drawing an inscription in front of his chest. A gust of noble spirit wind rose again. A tiger-shaped shadow actually rushed out from the gust of wind and rushed toward Dao Hong with a roar. Condensed qi into form? Looking at this tiger-shaped shadow, Dao Hong's heart sank to the bottom. He knew that General Hao Hu had probably reached the pinnacle of the 3rd grade of Essence Force, or even the 4th grade. He wasn't someone that he could withstand. Woo 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 woo. Just as Dao Hong's heart was trembling, 8 god-slaying bows sounded at the same time. The black armored army had unknowingly formed a formation around Dao Hong. The murderous flying arrows flickered with a chilling light that was darker than the dark night. They flew toward Dao Hong from all directions. Seeing this, Dao Hong's expression changed greatly. He suddenly soared into the sky. However, the god-slaying bows were too fast. He had only moved a few feet when the flying arrows had already reached him. Explode! Dao Hong clenched his teeth and suddenly formed a seal. The bronze bracelet's luster was abnormally bright. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Air currents gushed out like a fountain in all directions. The 8 god-slaying bows were actually blocked by Dao Hong. Unfortunately, just as Dao Hong was about to explode his treasures, General Hao Hu's tiger-shaped flying shadow had already arrived above his head. Although there was no stench coming from the mouth of the tiger, there was an aura of extermination. Dao Hong could no longer dodge. Puff! Dao Hong's face turned ferocious. He opened his mouth and a golden core that was smaller than a thumb rushed out. Woo! A violent wind blew, and the golden core suddenly expanded. Dao Hong actually wanted to explode his golden core and perish together with General Hao Hu. Humph. Boring. General Hao Hu sneered. The tiger-shaped flying shadow opened its mouth and swallowed the golden core. Boom. A loud sound was heard. The golden core exploded, and the tiger-shaped flying shadow exploded into pieces. Even General Hao, whose body was thrown back half a foot, not to mention the deep pit that was several feet in size on the ground below him. After the rumbling, a blood-curdling scream was heard. Two god-slaying bows shot out from the darkness like sickles. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but one of the bows pierced into Dao Hong's left cheek and the other into his heart. Dao Hong, who had already used up all of his tricks, was killed by the black armored army before he could put up any resistance. Dao Hong was already a cultivator in the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. He could be considered a Taoist expert. If he were to fight General Hao Hu alone, he would have no chance of winning. However, it was not impossible for him to escape. However, after he was injured by the god-slaying bows, he lost all his courage. He did not dare to challenge General Hao Hu and could only escape. Unfortunately, the god-slaying bows and the immortal-slaying crossbows were targeted at Taoist disciples. Regardless of speed or force, they could break through Taoist spells. Under such circumstances, how could Dao Hong possibly escape? Senior Xian. In the distant night, young Master Zhu heard the continuous screams. Although he could not see much with the art of clear eyes, how could he not know the miserable situation of the others when he heard the sounds of the immortal-slaying crossbows and the god-slaying bows? He groaned and tears fell from his eyes. He knew more clearly than ever that Senior Xian's painstaking efforts were as heavy as a mountain. If it was not for Senior Xian's obstruction, he would have been killed by the bows and arrows. -12. Chapter 3554. Ninyun, quick! Issue the order to retreat. Young Master Zhu cried out without hesitation as tears rolled down his cheeks. Young Master, leave quickly. Zhu Ninyun was even more decisive. She pulled young Master Zhu's arm and lifted him up, preparing to escape. No. Young Master Zhu roared and struggled. Issue the order quickly. They are the last elites of my Zhu clan. Where's the order to retreat? Zhu Ninyun roared even louder and told the truth. Young Master, we can only advance tonight. There is no retreat. This. Young Master Zhu was in a daze. After a moment, realization dawned in his eyes. What Senior Xian told him was something that was covered up. At this moment, a wave of spiritual force swept over. Then, a faint voice rang in the ears of Zhu Ninyun and the others. Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's young Master Zhu Xiang from the Zhu clan. You guys really don't give up. Since you're here, you've saved me the trouble of. Unfortunately, before General Hao Hu could finish his words, an even more powerful spiritual force rushed over, shattering the wave of spiritual force into pieces. An ethereal voice rang throughout the mountain range. Why is the Jade Mountain so lively? Is it welcoming me? In the distant horizon, a ball of light that was brighter than the crescent moon flew over like a meteor. A Pegasus that looked incomparably holy flashed its wings of light and pulled a flying chariot into everyone's field of vision. In the light, a tall and thin cultivator in a Taoist robe fluttered in the wind. His hair fluttered in the wind, making him look like a flying immortal. Generals, listen up. General Hao Hu saw this and knew that Xiaohua had come. He didn't care about the Zhu clan's generals who had been killed by the Black Armor Army. He waved his hand and activated his true energy. His voice shook the surroundings. Yes, thousands of Black Armor soldiers responded in unison. They abandoned the Zhu family's generals, reorganized their formation, and activated their genuine qi. Regardless of whether it was the immortal-slaying crossbows or the god-slaying bows, all of them flashed with clear light. Countless noble qi fell with a loud bang, and billions of inscriptions flowed in the noble qi. Senior, leave quickly. Zhu Xiang shouted without hesitation. This is the Godslayer bow specially made by the militarists of the Bronze Pillar Nation to counter Taoist spells. As far as Zhu Xiang could remember, There was no Taoist cultivator who could escape from the god-slaying bow. Ha ha ha. It's just a small trick. Xiaohua raised his head and laughed loudly. His laughter caused the broken leaves in the forest to fly up. Amidst his laughter, Xiaohua landed on the flying car. Then, he heard the rumbling sound of rolling thunder. Under Zhu Xiang's dumbstruck gaze, this otherworldly flying immortal stepped on heavenly thunder and arrived. Fire. As expected, General Hao, who was a veteran of the battlefield, his face was as calm as a mountain rock. Seeing Xiaohua land in midair, he waved his hand and gave the order. Whoosh whoosh, clang clang, woo woo. The sounds of bows and arrows rang out incessantly. Not a single murderous movement resounded in the pitch-black night. Rumble. The lone Taoist Xiao waved his hand. Thousands of heavenly thunders were born from the void. Each of them was more violent than a horned dragon as they charged towards the god-slaying bow and immortal-slaying crossbow. Bang bang bang. Even more intense explosions soared into the sky from the heavenly thunders. Even if it was the immortal-slaying crossbow, the god-slaying bow, and the thousands of black armored army in front of Xiaohua, who was at the 5th stage of origin energy, it was truly child's play. Killing people was even more so in the blink of an eye. Not a single arrow could break through the net of thunder. Not a single trace of killing intent could escape from the lightning. All of you, move to the side. Xiaohua smiled coldly. He slapped his hand on the top of his head. Boom. Under the moonlight, golden light flashed. A nascent soul hand of several acres in size appeared out of thin air, grabbing towards the army camp below. General Hao, whose face was ashen. He had already heard Northern Gua Institute chief's description. He had already thought that Xiaohua's strength was extraordinary. However, he still didn't truly estimate Xiaohua's strength. He still threw Northern Gua Institute chief's warning aside. He really didn't have the strength to stop Xiaohua. However, since it had already come to this, there was no reason to retreat. General Hao roared, "Kill!" The wind from the fist moved again. A tiger-shaped pillar of vast qi once again charged towards the gigantic palm that was descending from the sky. Boom! The pillar of vast qi rumbled and blasted a hole in the giant palm. The tiger-shaped flying shadow also disappeared, but the hand of the nascent soul was not stopped. In the barracks where thousands of black armored soldiers were resting, hundreds of immortal execution crossbows and god-slaying bows were destroyed by Xiaohua as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. When the giant hand grabbed the entire barracks disappeared, as if the black armored soldiers were stripped naked of their armor. Seeing the gigantic golden hand turn in midair, the golden light disappeared. The entire army camp's military supplies also disappeared. General Hao roared loudly. His body expanded by 2 zhang. The long spear in his hand whistled as it pounced towards Xiaohua, who was standing in midair with a smile, even more ferocious than the huge python. "You little brat, why are you arguing with this old man?" Xiaohua began to show off. Even Long Qingge wasn't this old man's opponent. "Who do you think you are? If I took your life, it would make this old man seem ungentlemanly. If I don't take your life, why are you so noisy? Fine, fine, fine. Let's see if you can take this old man's staff." As he spoke, Xiaohua grabbed in midair, and the wishful steel staff appeared. "Grow, grow, grow." Xiaohua shouted a few times. The wishful steel staff grew to 2 zhang. Xiaohua only needed to slightly wave it, and the wishful steel staff smashed down like a mountain. Woo! Just the deafening whistling sound made General Hao's body stagnate. Pa! The wishful steel staff accurately hit the python's head. With a loud bang, the long spear fell from General Hao's hand as if it was struck by lightning. The entire long spear was smashed into 2 pieces. Kill! General Hao's arms were numb, but his fighting spirit didn't decrease. With a roar, the tiger-shaped shadow appeared in his fists again. The vast qi rushed out again. Who knew that Xiaohua didn't dodge at all, nor did he use any magic power to cast any Dao arts. Xiaohua's figure suddenly turned illusory. Like a gust of wind, he floated in front of General Hao in the blink of an eye. With a wave of his right arm, He clenched his right fist and smashed it into the mouth of the tiger-shaped shadow. Boom! With a clear sound, the tiger-shaped shadow shattered. The vast chi also scattered in all directions. Xiao Hua's fist impressively appeared in front of General Hao Hu's chest. General Hao Hu looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. He absolutely didn't dare to believe that a Dao sect cultivator's punches and kicks were more powerful than him, a martial grandmaster from the school of the military. Looking at the black armor in front of his chest that had been tempered thousands of times by Xiao Hua's fist, General Hao Hu spat out a mouthful of black blood, and his entire body fell from midair. Plop! Smoke and dust flew in all directions as General Hao Hu fell to the ground. He struggled a few times, but couldn't get up. However, under the shattered black armor, his violently heaving chest showed that Xiao Hua didn't have any intention of taking his life. All of you, step down. Xiao Hua waved his hand, looked around, and said indifferently, "You all are not my match. I know that you all have military orders, so I won't take your lives. Your opponents are my Jiang country's Dao soldiers. If anyone dares to take half a step forward, I will definitely kill them." The thousands of black armored armies killing intent disappeared. They looked at Xiao Hua blankly and didn't know what to do. The 100 or so people closest to General Hao Hu unconsciously looked at him. "You, all of you, listen to my orders." General Hao Hu stood up from the ground with difficulty. His face was pale as he looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing in midair with a golden light flashing around his body. He knew that this was Xiao Hua's benevolence, and if he gave the order, it would only increase the casualties. Thus, he raised his hand and said, "Discard your weapons and sit on the ground." Yes. The soldiers felt relieved as they placed their weapons on the ground and sat down obediently. Xiao Hua nodded slightly, no longer paying attention to General Hao Hu. Auspicious clouds appeared beneath his feet, carrying Xiao Hua towards the Jade Mountain. Creak, creak. Xiao Hua had only flown a few meters when he heard a rough sound coming from the Jade Mountain in front of him. Then, the entire top of the Jade Mountain, as well as the entrance of the Jade Mountain, suddenly shone brightly. On the stone wall, an unknown stone gave off a brilliance that seemed to be made of Minghua stone, illuminating everything in front of Xiao Hua. Following the creaking sound, a chain bridge slowly extended out from the cave. On top of the chain bridge, there were two old men who were over 70 years old. The two of them were dressed in simple clothes, and their faces were clear and arrogant. Seeing that, Xiao Hua did not fly forward. He simply descended from the sky and stood at the edge of the stone cliff, watching indifferently. I didn't expect Taoist Master Xiao to be so magnanimous. No wonder Bagua Jinming praised him so much. Without waiting for the chain bridge to reach into the cliff, the old man in front cupped his hands and bowed, and said, "Since that's the case, this old man can't hide behind the chain bridge and do any dirty tricks. This old man is the Prime Minister of the Copper Pillar Country, Yan Zhijin." "Prime Minister?" Xiao Hua frowned, raised his hand to return the greeting, and said indifferently, "This old man heard that as long as the state teacher is killed, all grudges will be decided on the battlefield. What's the matter with your Copper Pillar Country? This old man killed a state teacher. Why did a general and a prime minister come out? Could it be that you want to force this old man to make a move against your Copper Pillar Country?" "Bastard!" Yan Zhijin did not speak, but the old man behind him scolded, "Easily exterminating a country, quietly killing people. The entire hidden immortal continent is in a mess because of your Taoist sects. Since you want to establish a country, then establish a country. Why do you need to take the imperial jade seal of our Confucian cultivators? Quickly hand over the imperial jade seal. Seeing that you still have mercy in your heart, this old man can spare your life." "Good. You really scared this old man to death." Xiao Hua laughed. "Who are you, old man?" "This old man is Jean Rushui." The old man said word by word, his face full of arrogance. "Oh." Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. He did not know who this old man was, but in the distance, young Master Zhu, who wanted to leave but did not dare to, had already used the clear eyes technique to see clearly. He said in a low voice, "Copper Pillar Country, why did you invite this old man here?" "Taoist Xiao, I'm afraid you're in trouble." -12. Chapter 3555. Yin Jijin opened his mouth again. Taoist Xiao, if you had only killed Lung Qingge, I would not have caused you any more trouble. Everything could have been settled on the battlefield. However, not only did you barge into my territory, you also took the 5-dragon Imperial Jade Seal. Naturally, we cannot just settle this with you on the battlefield. Zhan Rushui, Old Master Zhan Rushui, is a renowned great grandmaster among us Confucian cultivators. His simple and honest reputation is revered by all. He has heard of your atrocities and has specially come to Qinyu Mountain to help this old man retrieve the Imperial Jade Seal. If you take out the Imperial Jade Seal, Qinyu Mountain will retreat and everything will be fine. We will decide who is superior and inferior on the battlefield. Imperial Jade Seal? Xiao Hua was stunned and looked at Yin Jijin in confusion. He had already given the 5-dragon Imperial Jade Seal to Do Shanjun. However, who was Do Shanjun? Although he hid his Taoist identity in the Copper Pillar Academy, how would Xiao Hua know who he was going to give the Imperial Jade Seal to? From Yin Jijin's words, even if Do Shanjun gave the Imperial Jade Seal to the Copper Pillar Academy, the Copper Pillar Academy might not announce it. With the 5-dragon Imperial Jade Seal as bait, many Confucian cultivators would come to help the Copper Pillar Academy. How could the Copper Pillar Academy reject such a good deal? Haha, as the saying goes, if you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Xiao Hua laughed. I have already given the Imperial Jade Seal to the governor of the Imperial Academy to bring back to the Copper Pillar Academy. If you want it, you can go find him. Of course, I can imagine. Even if the governor gave the Imperial Jade Seal to the Copper Pillar Academy, Prime Minister Yin might not admit it. Oh? The governor of the Copper Pillar Academy, Do Shanjun? Yin Jijin frowned slightly and glanced at Zhan Rushui beside him. He shook his head and said, I only know of this person and am not familiar with him. Furthermore, I have never heard of the Imperial Academy returning the Imperial Jade Seal to the palace. Haha, rascal. What's the point of saying such baseless things now? Zhan Rushui laughed and pointed at Xiao Hua. Even if you really return the Imperial Jade Seal, what are you doing now? This is the prison of the Bronze Pillar Country. You keep saying that you want to use your Tao soldiers against the soldiers of the Bronze Pillar Country. Why are you using your martial arts to break the law? My hidden immortal continent is governed by Confucian cultivators. Unlike your Tao sect's lax rule, this old man is not talented, but I am willing to face the tyranny of your Tao sect as an ordinary Confucian cultivator and return the public courtesy of our Confucian cultivators. Although chivalrous men use martial arts to violate the laws of Confucianism, aren't they also using literature to violate the laws? Xiao Hua sneered. You keep talking about laws and etiquette, yet you're only a tiny Confucian cultivator. What qualifications do you have to represent the hidden immortal continent? You are only qualified to represent yourself. You're just trying to find a reason for your actions. Since that's the case, let's fight. After he finished speaking, Xiao Hua's body flashed with golden light. There was some anger in his eyes. He swept his gaze over Yin Jijin and Zhan Rushui and said, facing the 5 brocade cloud paintings, this old man is not afraid, let alone you 2 old men. Humph, you really think too highly of yourself. How can we join hands to fight against the enemy? Yin Jijin snorted coldly and took a few steps back. He raised his voice and said, we'll be relying on old Master Zhan for this battle, teaching the younger generation a lesson. This old man won't fall behind. Zhan Rushui laughed loudly and also took a few steps forward. His gaze was like lightning as he looked at Xiao Hua. His previous old appearance was swept away. Old Master. Xiao Hua looked at Zhan Rushui's somewhat trembling appearance and sneered. If we're talking, this Xiao may not be your opponent. But if we fight, this Xiao advises you to retreat. You haven't even cultivated true qi. How can you be this Xiao's opponent? Who would have thought that Zhan Rushui's eyes slanted at Xiao Hua and said indifferently, who said that one must cultivate true qi to kill the enemy? Have you never heard that if one has talent, a poem can kill the enemy, a painting can also kill the monarch? A scholar can pacify the world with an essay? Never heard of it. Xiao Hua smiled faintly. But suddenly, Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. He suddenly remembered what Fu Jiwen said at the auction at Jiaxinglu. He couldn't help but size up the seemingly arrogant Jean Rouchouet. Good. Today this old man will let you see what it means to be a great scholar, to criticize in speech and in writing, to set the world in writing, to be a scholar in his 70s, to have a sharp tongue, and to correct the laws of the court. Jean Rouchouet roared and opened his mouth. He shouted, the awe-inspiring Qi, the spirit of man, the style of writing for 10,000 years, listen to my command, fight, fight, fight. Following Jean Rouchouet's 3 roars, the entire Jade Mountain immediately surged with wind and clouds. Not only did the awe-inspiring Qi within several miles surge over like a tidal wave, even the silent, awe-inspiring Qi in the void seemed to listen to Jean Rouchouet's command, tearing through the void and rushing in. It was to the extent that when the righteous Qi was mobilized, a chilling intent was born from the heavens and the earth. Sounds like war drums and bugles were heard from the left and right. In an instant, Xiaohua had the illusion that he was being attacked by an army of thousands of men and horses. Xiaohua was a little startled. He had fought against more than 1 or 2 Confucian cultivators, but he had never encountered such a strange phenomenon. However, the development of the situation was beyond Xiaohua's expectations. The awe-inspiring Qi was far from simple. Following the sound of the bugles, there was the sound of the drums. On the entire Jade Mountain, countless awe-inspiring Qi seemed to have a spirit and rushed toward Xiaohua like thousands of soldiers and horses. The awe-inspiring Qi's sharpness actually cut through the void, producing a shrill sound. This was different from Longqing's golden spear. There was no specific image, only an ancient killing intent. This killing intent was so bleak that not to mention the falling leaves within several miles, even Xiaohua felt a burst of coldness. Boom, boom, boom. Not only that, but above Xiaohua's head, there were hundreds of awe-inspiring Qi pillars that pierced through the sky and directly fell toward Xiaohua. The solemn killing intent enveloped Xiaohua within 100 feet. It's hard to imagine. Xiaohua sighed. This world is really too mysterious. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, how could I have imagined that the seemingly defenseless old Confucian cultivator would actually have the power to command thousands of soldiers and horses? Kill. Xiaohua slapped the top of his head with the back of his hand. The Yuanying's hand was displayed, and it turned into a palm the size of an acre and grabbed toward the sky. Boom, boom, boom. With a series of explosions, the huge palm grabbed the awe-inspiring Qi pillars and shattered them. However, the huge palm was also defeated. The entire Jade Mountain was set off by a hurricane. Sand and stones flew everywhere. Not only were the huge trees uprooted, even the black armored army who were sitting quietly were unable to maintain their sitting posture. One by one, they were blown into the air. Some crashed into trees, some crashed into rocks, and many more died. Retreat, retreat. General Hao struggled to stabilize his body. Seeing the loss of his soldiers, he felt heartache. He shouted loudly and commanded the soldiers to retreat. After breaking the awe-inspiring Qi pillars, Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. After all, the awe-inspiring Qi that surged towards him seemed to be able to suffocate people. He hurriedly slapped his hand again, and the seal of overturning the sea roared and flew out of the space. Under the urging of his magic power, it directly charged into the thousands of soldiers and horses. Woo! At the beginning, the seal of overturning the sea was still like a whirlwind, rushing through a huge gap. However, after only advancing a few zhang, it seemed to have encountered a huge obstacle. Even though the seal of overturning the sea flashed with intense brilliance, it still couldn't advance even half a foot. Oh, this is somewhat interesting. Xiaohua was slightly surprised. He looked at the arrogant-looking old master Jean Rouchouet in the distance. Both of his hands moved, and rays of brilliance entered the void. However, in a moment, thousands of golden rays of light appeared near Jean Rouchouet. These rays of light flashed around Jean Rouchouet's body, like countless small snakes approaching Jean Rouchouet. However, after a moment, those rays of light didn't fall even half an inch. It was as if Jean Rouchouet's body was surrounded by the defense of the 5 elements, blocking Xiaohua's magic technique outside. Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. His face revealed an inconceivable expression. Immediately after, he rubbed his hands again. Those thousands of golden rays of light flourished and advanced a few more inches. Unfortunately, these golden rays of light only surrounded Jean Rushui and were unable to bind him. You want to go against the will of my hidden immortal continent's eternal scholar? Your cultivation is still a bit shallow. Jean Rushui laughed loudly. Your Taoist technique is inferior to the silk thread in the hands of this old man's embroiderer. Break. However, after hearing Jean Rushui's soft rebuke, another wave of dense killing intent burst out from his body. Xiao Hua's fingers trembled from the shock. The thousands of golden rays of light turned into nothingness. That noble qi even condensed into a sword array and pierced towards Xiao Hua. Old ignorant man. Xiao Hua was slightly angry. However, in his heart, he truly somewhat admired old Master Zhan's method. Previously, on the way to Jade Mountain, he had already talked with Lu Yi and Wang Bianfei about the effects of Confucian cultivation scrolls. He himself also read scrolls incessantly. After Xiao Hua cursed, he waved his hand and the seal of turning the sea returned to his space. Soon after, he coldly glanced at the somewhat arrogant Jean Rushui and waved his hand again. A golden ray of light soared into the sky. A pair of scissors like a flood dragon streaked across the sky. That dragon's tail swayed, and the noble qi that was like a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses was cut in half. The sword array was also disrupted. That golden ray of light didn't stop. Like a waterfall, it chopped towards Jean Rushui's waist. Yin Jijin, who was watching from afar, was extremely shocked. He finally understood why Long Qinga and the others were defeated by Xiao Hua. Who was Jean Rushui? He was a famous Confucian scholar in the hidden, immortal continent. He was truly an expert with a sharp tongue. One word could kill 1,000 soldiers. One word could kill 10,000 horses. He was currently the strongest person Tong Zhuge could ask for. Although this old master didn't practice Confucian cultivation techniques, this old master was brimming with talent. His strength was comparable to the top of the 5th level. In front of this kind of expert, Xiao Hua actually didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. After several fights, he still had a backup plan. How could Tong Zhuge be his opponent? Seeing that the golden ray of light was like a waterfall, cutting off the noble qi and rushing towards Jean Rushui's waist, Yin Jijin was greatly shocked. He couldn't help but shout, "Old master, be careful." At the same time, auspicious clouds also appeared under Yin Jijin's feet. His eyes flashed with absolute determination. -12. Chapter 3556. Child's Play. Jean Rushui snorted coldly, but the awe-inspiring aura several feet around him immediately turned into a whirlwind, carrying Jean Rushui's body skyward. He really had the power to soar 90,000 miles. The soaring dragon scissors instantly cut through the air, and at the same time, the whirlwind whistled. Unexpectedly, like Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand, it turned into a huge fist and smashed towards Xiao Hua. The space several dozen feet around Xiao Hua froze, as if thousands of years of students were waving their fists together to attack Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua furrowed his brows. The soaring dragon scissors, which were originally taking advantage of the situation, drew a few feet of golden light before stopping. Facing the 70-year-old Jean Rushui, a weapon like the soaring dragon scissors was really too savage. Xiao Hua really couldn't bear it. Just now, he had only used 60% of his magic power and didn't dare to use the full power of the soaring dragon scissors. Xiao Hua raised his head to look at the fist in the sky and the awe-inspiring aura all around him. He patted his chest, and the 5 silk handkerchiefs of the 5 qi righteous thunder rushed into the air. Once the silk handkerchiefs appeared, 5 colored clouds rose. Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and 5 rays of sword energy fell on it. An immortal slaying platform slowly emerged from the clouds. Thunder is the command of the heavens. Once my thunder comes out, all will obey. Xiao Hua's voice was like spring thunder. He waved his hand, and the 5 qi righteous thunder roared like 5 huge dragons winding down. Regardless of whether you're an ancient student or an ancient killing intent, Under my sound of thunder, all will enter the cycle of reincarnation. Rumble. Under the 5 chi righteous thunder, the awe-inspiring aura and ferocious killing intent were actually faster than boiling water falling on snow. They instantly turned into nothingness, or merged into the heavenly thunder, or hid in the void and disappeared without a trace. Swish. The soaring dragon scissors from before flashed in the air and swept past Jean Rouchouet. The belt around Jean Rouchouet's waist immediately broke. Brat. Jean Rouchouet turned pale with fright. You? How is this Taoist thunder-controlling technique possible? Unfortunately, before he could say anything, Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand once again covered him. Pooh! The big hand had already grabbed Jean Rouchouet. Put me down! Yin Jijin, who was already flying, had just seen Jean Rouchouet's escape. His heart relaxed. His figure originally stopped in the air, but when he saw Xiao Hua's attack, he was shocked and angry. He shouted, also wanted to use of the awe-inspiring aura. But the surrounding awe-inspiring aura's 5 chi, how could it still listen to his command S's, SSS, SSSS, S-Dragon, S-Chi, S-Chis, SSSSS, S-Soul Hand? This blue water was very fierce, and the sound of water splashing could be heard. The remaining stone walls were instantly corroded by the blue water. However, the nascent soul's hand was still shining brightly and wasn't corroded at all. Forget it. Yin Jijin sighed and waved her hand. She took out an inch-long white bone. This white bone was like a dagger, and there was a thumb-sized blood-red rune on it. This rune was very small and strange, so others couldn't see it clearly. Yin Jijin stabbed the white bone into her heart. Wong. There was a faint buzzing sound. The blood seeped into the white bone, and the entire white bone gave off a blood-red glow. The rune that went deep into the blood trembled. In the blink of an eye, the rune absorbed all the blood, and the entire white bone entered Yin Jijin's body. Yin Jijin's face was bright red. He looked at Xiao Hua's big hand and urged the clouds under his feet. His eyes were like blood as he cried, Xiao Hua, quickly let go of old Master Jean. Otherwise, this old man will not let you go even if I become a ghost. Humph! Xiao Hua sneered and waved his big hand in the air. If you want to be a ghost, then don't be a ghost. This old man also never wanted to take the life of a great scholar like old Master Jean. He was only bewitched by you. Woo! Yin Jijin's body suddenly expanded. She rushed towards the nascent soul's hand and let out a mournful cry. Pung! With a loud sound, Yin Jijin's body exploded. Blood and flesh flew everywhere, and a lot of blood fell on the nascent soul's hand. A bit boring. Xiao Hua frowned. He waved his hand and blocked the blood and flesh. He flew into the air and coldly said, This old man said I won't take old Master Jean's life. Why are you in such a hurry? Before he finished speaking, the nascent soul's hand turned into a ray of light and flew into the distance. Only when he was dozens of kilometers away did he release his hand. Jean Rouchouet was thrown to the ground in a sorry state by the nascent soul. Seeing the golden big hand suddenly withdraw like a god, Jean Rouchouet's face was disappointed and frustrated. He really didn't understand how Xiao Hua's Dao sect's thunder technique could defeat his noble spirit. However, he didn't have time to think about this. He stretched out his hand and tightened the belt around his waist to see if he could reattach the broken part. Xiao Hua withdrew his nascent soul's hand, and the soaring dragon shears hovered in the air for a moment before falling into his hand. At this moment, the night was even darker, but the surroundings of Qianyu Mountain were even more chaotic. Mountain rocks were scattered, trees were toppled, and many black armor soldiers were smashed into the stone walls by the Aoran Chi pillar and turned into meat paste. After the Aoran Chi dissipated, an unconcealable smell of blood gradually diffused. Sigh, Xiao Hua sighed. He scooped up the 5 chi thunder silk handkerchief into his dantian. It was still set up by the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua into the immortal slaying stage. Then, he looked at the silent Qinyu Mountain and said loudly, Generals of Qinyu Mountain, this old man is here to save Jiang Country's state teacher Li Xiang. You can send him and the disciples out. This old man doesn't want to kill again. However, After half a cup of tea's time, the silence was still the silence. The night was still the night. There was no change. Humph. You really won't turn back until you hit the south wall. Xiao Hua sneered. He scanned the area with his spiritual sense and said indifferently, "Since that's the case, don't blame this old man for being unreasonable." As he spoke, Xiao Hua's body turned into a rainbow. He didn't walk on the chain bridge and rushed towards the entrance of Qinyu Mountain. Buzz buzz. Just as Xiao Hua's figure crossed the cliff and had yet to fly over the mountain stream, suddenly, the bloody light around Xiao Hua's body flourished, covering the golden light in an instant. The mana around Xiao Hua's body stagnated, and his body fell into the black water of the mountain stream like a falling stone. Old man. Xiao Hua was shocked. Looking at the bloody light floating around his body, he immediately understood the reason why Yin Jijin self-destructed in front of him. This was something he had planned long ago. Just as Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his nascent soul to transfer his true essence, he heard a strange sound in his ears. It was like a flood that overflowed the sky. At the same time, a burst of light and shadow appeared in front of his eyes. It was like the mountains were shaking. The scenery around Xiao Hua had completely changed. Qinyu Mountain was gone, the cliff was gone, and only a black sky and black earth remained. There was no starlight in the darkness, no moonlight, only an unpleasant stench. An illusion array? A moment later, Xiao Hua's mana returned to normal. He frowned and stopped. He was about to open his Dharma eye to take a look. Chirp! A bird-like sound entered Xiao Hua's ears. A strange rune flashed in the darkness in front of Xiao Hua. This rune was somewhat similar to the runes of the Dao sect that Xiao Hua cultivated, but it was completely different. As soon as this rune appeared, a kind of blazing heat was born from the rune. Even the rune itself appeared a kind of crimson color. Roar! Just as the bird-like rune appeared, another angry roar came from behind Xiao Hua. This time, the rune was different from before. It actually emitted a light green color, and this color carried a kind of desolate coldness. What is this? Xiao Hua's curiosity was greatly aroused. He simply withdrew his Dharma eye and golden light flashed around his body. He was more curious. At this time, what kind of defensive array could the Copper Pillar State have that was more powerful than the 5 brocade cloud painting? Chirp! The crimson rune chirped again and suddenly expanded. A ball of flame spurted out from the rune, and a savage bird that looked similar to the vermilion bird rushed out. As soon as this savage bird appeared, its crimson eyes turned and immediately saw the faint, bloody light around Xiao Hua's body. It raised its head, and an indescribable ferocious aura mixed with an aura of desolation rushed towards Xiao Hua. Yao? Yao? Xiao Hua was shocked. Knowing that he had fallen into Yin Jijin's trap, he didn't dare to be negligent. His hands formed seals, and thousands of golden threads suddenly appeared and danced around the barbaric bird. Who? The barbaric bird opened its mouth and spat out a scarlet flame. Its body was several zhang in color and quickly burned. Xiao Hua's binding technique was actually unable to land. Roar! The rune in front moved, and the rune in the back naturally didn't want to fall behind. A cyan light appeared, and the shadow of a savage beast that looked like an anteater appeared. It was also ferocious, and it was also difficult to conceal its desolate aura. Yao Formation. This is the 1,000 Yao Sacred Realms Yao Formation. Damn it! Why would the Copper Pillar State's prison have a Yao Formation? Suddenly, Xiao Hua realized that this Yao Formation was probably what Qin Yushan was relying on. Sure enough, when the two kinds of auras clashed together, an unexpected change occurred. The entire pitch-black space instantly exploded, and the void split apart bit by bit. The pitch-black light scattered throughout the entire space. What was special was that the two strange runes circled around, and the two images of barbaric beasts carried an ancient aura as they charged towards Xiao Hua. This aura seemed to be real, and one could believe that if it was on a real cliff, it would be a scene of mountain rocks bursting and trees splashing. The aura that could crush everything in the entire space attacked everything. Xiao Hua's protective golden light flickered extremely under this aura, as if it could be broken at any time. Oh! Xiao Hua was shocked, and then he activated the heavenly law embodiment technique. Woo-woo. The wind howled, and in the midst of the ferocious aura, a Tinjong golden body suddenly appeared. What made Xiaohua puzzled was that this Yao formation actually didn't block the heaven and earth yuan qi. He activated the heavenly law embodiment technique, and a huge amount of heaven and earth yuan qi swarmed in. Woo! Xiaohua's two big hands separately waved, one from the front and one from the back, grabbing the two vicious beasts. Xiaohua's big hands carried the heaven and earth sleeve, and the two vicious beasts' phantoms were immediately covered. -12. Chapter 35:57. Roar. Between the roars of the two vicious beasts, flames and water splashed everywhere, as if they could not escape from Xiaohua's control. Looking again, the torn void streaked across Xiaohua's golden body, and a wound like a baby's mouth flashed and disappeared, unable to cause real damage. Even when the stinky water fell, the golden light only flashed slightly, and in a moment, it was bounced away. This demon array is only... Xiaohua sneered. But at this moment, roar. Gigi. The two vicious beast phantoms roared again. Wave after wave of ferocious aura surged out from the phantoms like a rising tide, endlessly pouncing towards Xiaohua. Oh? What's going on? Xiaohua was suspicious and opened his eyes, only to see two runes in front of him. One was like a thread of fire, the other was like a gurgling stream. Above the two runes, the power of starlight fell from the sky and fell on them. The runes were using the power of starlight to produce an attack. The power of the moon and stars? Xiaohua's heart moved, and he waved his hand, wanting to use the wishful staff, but his mind changed, and little yellow and little black flew out of the space. The two little ones looked around curiously, and when they saw the two vicious beast phantoms formed by the runes, woof woof, Gigi, the two simultaneously roared excitedly and rushed towards the two phantoms. Alas, this Xiao was wrong. Looking at the two little ones and the vicious beast phantoms, Xiaohua sighed. Little yellow and little black are monsters, and this battle is their nature. This shall only put them into the space, and although it is comfortable, even with the wonderful fate of yin and yang, it can't make them happy. Rather than this, it's better to let them go. Thinking of this, the knot in Xiaohua's heart was untied. Qin Yushan's demon array was really powerful. Although the two little ones had some means, in the face of the two vicious beast phantoms, they were still not a match. Several times, they were beaten into the air, and blood gradually appeared on their bodies. Xiaohua looked and couldn't help but feel distressed. Several times, he wanted to help, but several times, he held back. After a meal's time, although the two little ones fought more and more bravely, the phantoms did not know fatigue under the power of the stars, and soon the two little ones were at a disadvantage. This is a little unfair. Xiaohua looked at the pillar of stellar force and thought to himself. Last time, when he had awakened Wang Biafei's spirit, he had used the devil blade to cut off the pillar of stellar force. Here, he didn't want to reveal the devil blade. After thinking for a while, Xiaohua clapped his hand and the ice mirror fell into the air. Following the activation of Xiaohua's transcendence energy, the ice mirror expanded to several dozen feet in size and flew above his head. Buzz! An extremely heavy force landed on the ice mirror, causing it to emit a rumbling sound. Although the pillar of stellar force wasn't completely isolated, at least 70% of the pillar of stellar force was blocked by the ice mirror. Woof woof! Gigi. When they saw Xiaohua make a move, the two little ones were excited. They wagged their tails and pounced over once again. After all, they were just illusions and the runes of the demonic array. Without the support of the pillar of stellar force, in less than half an incense stick's worth of time, the two little ones paused in midair at the same time. One let out a himph, and the other let out a ha. Silver light emitted from their mouths and noses, and they absorbed the soul essences of the two runes into their bodies. As the illusions of the two vicious beasts disappeared, the entire demonic array collapsed in an instant. Walala! The sound of water was incessant. It was the black water surrounding the jade mountain that fell from midair. The night sky was revealed. The light of the cliff also appeared. Right at the entrance of the cave in front of the Jade Mountain, a group of people wearing black armor, under the lead of a general who looked as if he had just lost his parents, stood there stupidly, looking at Xiao Hua in disbelief. Xiao Hua's cold eyes swept over them, and he simply ignored them. His gaze fell on the two bones floating in midair beside him. One of the bones was scarlet red, and the other was green. It was similar to the color of the two vicious beasts from before. However, these bones were rather large. One was as thick as Xiao Hua's leg, and the other was as big as a person. Moreover, the runes on these two bones were so dim that they were almost indiscernible. They were exactly the same as the runes that Xiao Hua had seen before. These are strange bones? Could it be that the demonic array was made from these bones? Xiao Hua knew that this was not the time to think too much. He waved his hand and collected the two bones. Then, he looked at the exhausted Goldie and Blackie flying beside him. "How is it?" Xiao Hua asked with a smile. "It's nothing, father," Blackie replied. "The boy feels quite full. It's just that the taste is a bit bitter. That little bird is a bit too weak." Goldie's reply was different from Blackie's. If it wasn't for the pillar giving it strength, the boy would have already defeated it. This is just the beginning. If you two... Speaking up to here, Xiao Hua suddenly realized something. He couldn't help but be ecstatic. This was because Goldie and Blackie were not talking to him through their minds like before. Instead, they were speaking from their beasts' mouths. Although it was their first time speaking, it was actually very smooth. Presumably, the two little things had practiced a lot in the space. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed. Without saying anything, he waved his big sleeve and collected the two little things into the space. He looked at the group of people at the entrance of the cave and shouted, "This old man is in a good mood today. I originally wanted to overturn this Jade Mountain of yours, but I'll forget about it now. Quickly release Li Xiang and the others." Xiao, Daoist Xiao. The general at the front had just woken up. He hurriedly jumped down from his horse and bowed. This one is on horseback. Please invite Daoist Li and the others to come up." "Humph, at least you know how to behave." Xiao Hua coldly snorted. All kinds of intimidating actions in his mind were thrown to the side. Sure enough, not long after, a young man covered in blood appeared in front of Xiao Hua. His hands and feet were shackled, and there were thick chains on his shoulders. The young man's hair was stuck on his face. There were many bloodstains on his face, and there were also some bloodstains on his face. However, these could not stop the young man's arrogance. Following the young man came out, there were dozens of people. Among them, 9 of them were strung on the same chain as the young man. The others were divided into 3 groups and strung on other chains. After the young man came out, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing in the air. He stuck out his tongue and licked his dry lips. He did not open his mouth to speak. Damn it! Xiao Hua saw this group of people in such a miserable state. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He knew that Li Xiang and the others must have suffered a lot in the Jade Mountains National Prison. Even their cultivation would be crippled. After all, who would understand the principle of eliminating evil? "Why don't you hurry up and remove their torture devices?" Xiao Hua roared. Who knew that the general trembled and knelt down on one knee. He cried out, "Let Daoist know that Daoist Li and the others were already wearing torture devices when they were escorted here. The items used to remove the torture devices are not in the Jade Mountain." When Yin Jijin came over, he did not say anything. Xiao Hua frowned and asked. Lord Prime Minister did not give this general anything. The general lowered his head and said, he only said, "If Daoist Li killed his way to the Jade Mountain's cave, we did not need to do anything. Everything will be done according to Daoist Li's request. As long as Daoist Li and the others see them, he will definitely spare our lives." "Oh, why would this old man spare your lives?" Xiao Hua was very surprised. "Fellow Daoist." At this time, Li Xiang opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, because this Li's cultivation was not crippled by the copper pillar state. This Li's disciple should be the same. Therefore, Yin Jijin felt that fellow Daoist Li would let this Li spare their lives on this account. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua was overjoyed and nodded. Fellow Daoist Li's cultivation is still there. Congratulations. If these soldiers' lives are spared, Then so be it. I will listen to fellow Daoist's orders, Li Xiang said coolly. Xiao Hua opened his mouth and a sword light flew out. Clang, clang, clang. Dozens of crisp sounds rang out. The chains on Li Xiang and the others' shoulders, as well as the torture tools on their hands and feet, were all shattered. Moreover, the sword light was extremely sharp. When the chains and torture tools broke, it did not affect their injuries at all. Fellow Daoistly, this one is Xiao Hua of the Dao sect. Right now, I can be considered the state teacher of Jiang country. The princess of Chongling and Qin Xiaoyao asked this Xiao to come to the Jade Mountain to rescue fellow Daoist. Fortunately, I did not fail my mission. Fellow Daoist and the others' injuries can be dealt with after leaving this place, Xiao Hua said as he put away his flying sword. Oh? Hearing Xiao Hua call himself the state teacher of Jiang country, Li Xiang was clearly stunned. However, he raised his hand with some difficulty and said, I thank the state teacher for saving us. I will listen to the state teacher's arrangements. All right. Xiao Hua nodded and shouted to the general of the Jade Mountain. Why aren't you preparing the horses? Yes, yes. The general hurriedly waved his hand. The soldiers behind him hurriedly jumped down from their horses and led the horses in front of Li Xiang and the others. Let's go. Xiao Hua looked at the flat cable bridge again. It was rather narrow and could only allow one person to pass through. He waved his hand and said, All right. Li Xiang stepped on the stirrups and responded. He wanted to get on the horse, but he was too weak and could not get on. The black armored army of the Copper Pillar country did not dare to be negligent and quickly helped him up the horse. Thank you. Li Xiang glanced at the black armored army and said indifferently. The black armored army shrunk their necks and replied in a low voice, I don't dare. Li Xiang's words of thanks made Xiao Hua's lips curl up slightly. Facing an enemy soldier who had tortured him to such a state, Li Xiang was still able to say these two words. One could imagine Li Xiang's magnanimity. Xiao Hua did not save him in vain. The other dozens of people were even weaker than Li Xiang and were unable to get on their own horses. They were all sent onto their horses by the black armored army. Li Xiang shook the reins and was about to move out when an anxious voice shouted from the other side of the cliff, Daoist Master Xiao, Daoist Master Xiao, I have eyes but fail to see. I do not know Daoist Master Xiao's true appearance. Xiao Hua frowned and raised his head to look. He saw that young Master Zhu from before was rolling and crawling. It was unknown if he was flying or running, but in short, he appeared on the cliff in an extremely sorry state. There were a few bloodstains on his forehead. The scholar's scarf on his head had long disappeared, and the brocade robe on his body had several holes in it. -12. Chapter 3558. Who are you? Which fellow Daoist disciple are you? Why should this old man help you? Xiao Hua asked indifferently. This young man is not a Daoist's disciple. Young Master Zhu took a deep breath and said, This young man is a disciple of the Zhu clan in Shuzhou's Wuyuan County. My name is Zhu Xiang. My father's name is a secret. My Zhu clan is the descendant of the great scholar Zhu Shi. Due to a rumor in the outside world that my ancestor Zhu Shi accidentally obtained the heavenly book's true enlightenment, we were forced by a scholarly family. Now that my Zhu clan has declined, it can no longer be considered an aristocratic family. However, the king of the Copper Pillar state is still obsessed with the heavenly book's true enlightenment. My father and my Zhu clan's disciples were captured by them and brought to Qinyu Mountain. Now, their fate is unknown. Heavenly book's true enlightenment? Xiao Hua's face showed a thoughtful expression. He asked, What's that? This young man doesn't know. Zhu Xiang replied without hesitation. This young man has never heard my father mention this. I reckon that my Zhu clan has never obtained the heavenly book's true enlightenment. This should have been made up by my ancestors' enemies. So it's like this. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He understood that this so-called heavenly book's true enlightenment was probably a rumor. If the true enlightenment existed in this world, how could Xin, who came from a scholarly family, not know? How could the true enlightenment of the five Qis unifications be lost? However, to Xiao Hua, it didn't matter whether there was the heavenly book's true enlightenment or not. Since Zhu Xiang was a descendant of Zhu Shi and a member of the Zhu clan, How could Xiaohua not help him? Thinking of the Zhu clan's family of 4 in Jinghua City, the talismans on their bodies, and the scroll that old Lady Zhu gave to Xiaohua in his own space, Xiaohua couldn't just stand by and watch. Quickly go and invite old Master Zhu Qing out, Xiaohua ordered indifferently. The black-armored general slightly hesitated. However, he immediately came to his senses and hurriedly shouted, quickly bring old Master Zhu and his family out. Not long after, a Confucian scholar of around 50 years of age and a dozen slightly younger scholars were supported out. These Confucians were even more miserable than Li Xiang. Some had lost arms, some had lost legs, and even more of them did not have a single piece of good flesh on their bodies, their flesh badly mangled. The Confucian scholar in his 50s had his eyes half open, and his face was swollen to a size larger than an ordinary person's. He couldn't even walk. Father! Zhu Xiang couldn't hold it in any longer and hurriedly ran over from the chain bridge. At this time, a few family guards had already arrived behind him. They hurriedly pulled him back and said anxiously, "Young master, don't be anxious. You can't cross this chain bridge. Let me invite old master out first." "Oh, all right." Zhu Xiang was very obedient. He stopped and called out to Zhu Cheng, "Father, the person in the air is Jianghua's national advisor, Taoist Master Xiao. He was the one who saved you." Zhu Cheng reluctantly raised his head and looked at Xiaohua in the air. He cupped his hands with difficulty and said, "This old man, thanks Taoist Xiao." "You're welcome." Xiaohua nodded. "This old man has some connections with the Zhu family, so saving you is something I should do?" "Oh?" Zhu Cheng stared blankly for a moment. His eyes turned slightly, and he opened his mouth again. "Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation. Is it at the 5th level of origin energy?" Xiaohua frowned. He didn't understand why Zhu Cheng asked such a question. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, Probably. Why are you asking this?" Zhu Cheng clenched his teeth. He extended his hand and pulled out his waist blade from the black armored army beside him. The black armored army was shocked. He hurriedly tried to dodge, but when the black armored army dodged, Zhu Cheng lost his balance and was about to fall. Xiaohua waved his hand and supported Zhu Cheng. He smiled and said, "Old Master Zhu, why lower yourself to the same level as a soldier?" Zhu Cheng didn't answer. He flipped his hand, and the tip of his waist blade pierced into his calf. Shwa! With another push, his calf was cut open and blood flowed out. "What are you doing?" Xiaohua was shocked, and the others were also puzzled. "Father!" Zhu Xiang shouted even louder. He wanted to pounce over. Zhu Cheng took a deep breath and threw his waist blade away. He extended 2 fingers and groped around in the flesh of his calf. He took out something smaller than the size of his finger. He extended his trembling arm and weakly said, "Taoist Master Xiao saved my life. I have nothing to repay you with. This is something passed down from my ancestors. As for what it is exactly, I don't know. Today, I will offer this to Taoist Master." Without waiting for Zhu Cheng to finish speaking, Zhu Cheng's head tilted and he fainted. That little thing stained with blood was still tightly held in his hand, and he raised it in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua instantly understood Zhu Cheng's intention. He slightly shook his head. He couldn't describe the feeling in his heart. If Zhu Cheng was trying to divert the disaster, Zhu Cheng had also asked his own cultivation. His strength had reached the 5th level of origin energy. In the Taoist sect, he was a spirit-severing stage cultivator. He definitely had the strength to hold the Zhu clan's inheritance. If Zhu Cheng was only trying to repay a favor, Zhu Cheng had no reason to offer this item in front of so many people. It was obvious that he wanted to throw away the inheritance that had implicated the Zhu clan. Moreover, Xiaohua was a Taoist sect cultivator. Zhu Cheng's Zhu clan's inheritance was used by Confucian cultivators. Zhu Cheng also didn't see Xiaohua's flying sword. Naturally, he didn't know that Xiaohua was a Confucian cultivator. What use did Xiaohua have for it? Forget it. Xiaohua pondered for a moment, but didn't refuse. He simply went with the flow and waved his hand. The blood-stained item fell into his hand. After carefully examining it, he stored it in his space. Then, he coldly said to the people in front of the Jade Mountain, "You all saw that this old man took this item. If anyone dares to leak the news, they will die." If anyone dares to leak it, I will definitely return to the Jade Mountain. I will kill everyone I see. Taoist Master. The general in front of the Jade Mountain smiled bitterly and said, if the monarch asks, this general doesn't know how to report it. Moreover, Zhu Cheng gave it to Taoist Master. Although the general didn't finish his sentence, Xiao Hua understood. After thinking a little, he felt that it was true. If these people didn't dare to leak it, who would know that it was in his hands? If they wanted to find it, wouldn't they have to look for the Zhu clan? Wouldn't he have taken advantage of them and still acted innocent? His previous warning was like taking off his pants to fart. It was completely unnecessary. Humph, you just have to report it as it is. Xiao Hua coldly said, however, you still have to pass a message to your monarch. Don't think too much. Although I don't like to kill people, if there is any entanglement, I will definitely not be merciful. There won't be any benefits like Jean Rouchouet today. Yes, this general understands. This general has already reported it to my monarch. The general hurriedly replied. Li Xiang, who hadn't left before, raised his eyebrows when he heard Jean Rouchouet's order. His eyes were secretly filled with astonishment. Then, he looked at the black armored army in front of the Jade Mountain, who were more well-behaved than rabbits. He understood a lot in his heart. At this moment, the dozen or so guards of the Zhu clan also leaped over the cable bridge. When they arrived near, they all bowed to Xiao Hua and hurriedly left with the unconscious Zhu Cheng and the others. Zhu Xiang, who was at the edge of the cliff, knelt down towards Xiao Hua and kowtowed a few times before following the crowd. Previously, when Zhu Xiang asked Xiao Hua to save Zhu Cheng, he didn't kneel down. However, when he saw Xiao Hua accept Zhu Cheng's item, he knew that Xiao Hua was righteous and had sincerely blocked the disaster for the Zhu clan. The gratitude in his heart was incomparable. Finally, he pushed the golden mountain down the jade pillar and threw away the gold under a man's knee. Looking at Zhu Xiang's back, Xiao Hua suddenly thought of Jinghua City's Zhu Feng and hurriedly transmitted a few words. Zhu Xiang stared blankly, his entire body trembling. He hurriedly turned his head. Although he didn't say anything, anyone could clearly see the wild joy on his face. Without waiting for Zhu Xiang to say anything, Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out a few jade bottles. With a wave of his hand, the jade bottles flew across the mountain stream and landed in front of Zhu Xiang. Xiao Hua then said in a clear voice, "Young Master Zhu, please tell your father on behalf of this old man that if this old man has the time, I will definitely pay a visit to the Zhu clan." Zhu Xiang received the jade bottle and carefully put it away. He said respectfully, "My Zhu clan will never forget Taoist Master Zhao's great kindness. Taoist Master Zhao's life will be passed down in my Zhu clan for generations." Hee, go. Xiao Hua waved his hand, lowered his head to look at Li Xiang and the others and laughed. "Fellow Li, let's go as well." "All right." Li Xiang patted his mount, and the black horse let out a long neigh. Its four hooves flipped as it rushed towards the direction of the chain bridge. However, after a while, dozens of people had crossed the chain bridge, and Li Xiang's cultivation had yet to recover, so his consciousness could not be used. However, seeing the destruction caused by Xiao Hua and the others, Li Xiang was even more surprised in his heart, and when he saw the black armored army that covered the entire mountain range, his surprise had already reached its peak. He was the second imperial advisor of the Jiang country, and had fought with the Copper Pillar State for many years. How could he not know the power of the Copper Pillar State? Since the Copper Pillar State had placed such an elite here, and even had the great scholar Jean Rouchouet, then what about the Copper Pillar State's imperial advisor, Longqinga? General Hao Hu? All of a sudden, a general in bright armor appeared at the foot of a mountain not far away. His rock-like face had an indescribable expression as he looked at the top of Li Xiang and the others. Li Xiang was shocked when he saw this person. Immediately, Li Xiang followed General Hao Hu's gaze and saw Xiao Hua's figure slowly rising up in the sky. In front of him was a heavenly horse that was flashing with a holy light, dragging a carriage and flying out. It was precisely descending from the sky to welcome Xiao Hua. Taoist Master Xiao. Taoist Master Xiao. Li Xiang's heart was filled with complex emotions. Seeing Xiao Hua's figure land on the flying carriage, he muttered to himself. When Xiao Hua landed on the flying carriage, Lu Yi and Wang Yi flew up, saying that they were welcoming their master. The two of them had limited cultivation, and Xiao Hua was afraid that the battle would affect the two of them. So he made the heavenly horse and flying carriage stop at an extremely high altitude. The two of them could not see the specific situation and could only hear the extremely loud rumbling sounds, as well as various colored lights. At the same time, they could feel the intense changes in the heaven and earth origin energy, causing their hearts to clench together. Later on, the entire mountain range fell silent, and the heavenly horse did not fly down, causing them to be even more afraid. Only when the heavenly horse was urged to fly slowly did the two of them finally relax. "You can wait here." Xiao Hua waved his hand and sat down cross-legged. With another wave of his hand, little yellow, little black, and little silver appeared in the air. When Wang Yifei saw little yellow, his eyes widened. He instantly thought of what Xiao Hua had said earlier, and his expression changed greatly. -12. Chapter 35:59. Father, Mother, two little mouthfuls of human language, jumping happily in front of Xiao Hua. Knowing that he can leave home, Xiao Huang also regains his previous happiness. When Xiao Huang sees Wang Bianfei, he wags his big tail and complains to Xiao Hua, "Mother, Mother, this boy said his master is more powerful than Mother. You go and find his master." Boy doesn't believe that there is someone more powerful than Mother in this world. "Master." Wang Bianfei miserably stands there, looking pitiful. He secretly glances at Xiao Huang, not knowing what to say. "Xiao Huang, this is Mother's disciple, Wang Bianfei." Xiao Hua says with a smile, "The master he is talking about is Mother." "Ah, is that so?" Xiao Huang is stunned, then wags his tail and flies around Wang Bianfei a few times. His dark eyes stare at Wang Bianfei a few times and cries, "Boy, since you are Mother's disciple, why didn't you say so earlier?" "That, young master," Wang Bianfei says with a smile, "didn't this little one just know? Master has already scolded this little one before. Today, this little one apologizes to young master." Saying that, Wang Bianfei bows. Forget it. I won't lower myself to your level." Xiao Huang's tone is very similar to Xiao Hua's. His tail wagging is as clean and nimble as Xiao Hua's hands. "Bianfei, no need to call him young master." Xiao Hua snappily says, "Just call him Xiao Huang. You are this old man's disciple who is not included in the wall, so you are of the same generation as him." "Yes, master." Wang Bianfei smiles, knowing that Xiao Hua is no longer angry with him. "Mother, what is the same generation?" Xiao Huang is very curious. Xiao Hua doesn't answer. He turns to Lu Yi and Wang Bianfei and says, "You wait in the car first. This old man will talk to them for a while." After Lu Yi and Wang Bianfei enter the flying car, Xiao Hua says with a smile, "Xiao Huang, this world is incomparably huge. It is not something our family can compare to. Moreover, there are a lot of people and a lot of things in this world that you can't know by staying by Mother's side. Previously, Mother was reluctant to let you go out because she was afraid that you would encounter some danger. Just now you also saw those two. Savage beast soul. Although they are very powerful, there are many things in this world that are more powerful than them. Mother, this boy is not afraid." This was Goldie's answer. "Daddy, how powerful is he?" This was Little Black's question. "Hee, you can only know how powerful he is when you see it with your own eyes. As for whether I'm afraid or not, that's secondary. The most important thing is to stay alive." Xiao Hua lovingly looked at the two little things. He knew that today was the day of separation, and these two demonic beasts couldn't even differentiate between mother and father. How could they become real demonic beasts? A demonic beast that couldn't even distinguish between peers was definitely not a qualified demonic beast. Xiao Hua's exhortation lasted for several hours. Seeing the scorching sun overhead, under the flying car, Li Xiang and the others were a little tired from riding. Only then did Xiao Hua reluctantly listen. It seemed that he still had a lot to say, as if he always wanted to keep the two little things by his side for a while longer. However, the two little things' wings had to grow, and they could only leave his side. He had done everything, so the two little things could only remain ignorant forever. Seeing that Goldie was a little impatient and Little Black was listening with great interest, Xiaohua couldn't hide a kind of feeling in his heart. It was as if the two's departure emptied his heart. Suddenly, a kind of distant memory appeared in his mind. That memory was some white hair, some tears, and some faint fragrance of milk. Mother. Xiaohua's eyes were moist. Where are you? Mother. At this time, an even weaker voice sounded. This boy also wants to go out with you. What are you going to do? You're so young. Didn't you hear what Mother said? It's very dangerous outside. Wait until you're a little older before you tell Mother. Goldie's voice was very impatient. Xiaohua was helpless as he looked at Little Silver and said, Little Silver, just call this old man Master. Yes, Master. Little Silver felt very wronged. It looked like he also wanted to be rebellious like Goldie. It's not that I don't want you to go. Xiaohua suddenly had the awareness of being a mother, and almost self-taught, he coaxed Little Silver. Look, your mother and Little Black are both gone. So doesn't this mean that there's no one by this old man's side? Do you want this old man to be alone at home? That's true. Little Silver mumbled a little. Xiaohua struck while the iron was hot. Also, Little Silver is very capable and can help this old man by staying with him. Wasn't it Little Silver who discovered the primordial stone mine in Black Cloud Ridge? You've really done this old man a big favor. The boy knows. Little Silver was a little proud as he nodded his little head repeatedly. Mother, when is the boy leaving? Goldie urged. Xiaohua looked at the scorching sun and said, Go now, but you have to remember, don't have the heart to harm others, and be on guard against them. You two have to discuss everything, Mother. You've already said this 4 times. Xiao Huang interrupted Xiaohua's words. Little Black said, Yes, Father. The boy understands. He definitely won't let Father worry. The boy will take a look outside. He'll be right back. AI, go. Xiaohua waved his hand. No matter how much they talked, they had to part in the end. Even if he didn't let Goldie go today, what about tomorrow? The day after tomorrow? All right. Goldie wagged his tail and soared into the sky. He casually put down something and flew away. Master, you're really too good to them. Lu Yi, who hadn't spoken rashly all this time, looked at Little Silver on Xiaohua's shoulder and said enviously, It's not like you're a demon pet at all. This is this old man's boy. Xiaohua sighed and stroked Little Silver. Little Silver also obediently licked Xiaohua's finger with his little tongue. This old man has never treated them as demon pets. By the way, Master, I heard Taoist Xiao say that demon pets need to be bound with some kind of restriction, otherwise, they might betray their master or be captured by other cultivators. Lu Yi was still a little worried as he asked, Master, you definitely don't have any restrictions on them, right? If you let them go just like that, what kind of restriction would my children need? Xiaohua said with a smile. They're all intelligent and can understand human speech. This old man has never thought of it that way. However, if anyone dares to bully them, this old man absolutely won't let them off even if I go to the 9th heaven or the 9th hell. Thinking of how protective Xiaohua had been in the Black Cloud Ridge primordial stone mine, even when the black bear spirit had been bullied, Xiaohua had still wanted the other party's arm. Louis stuck out his tongue and laughed. I hope no one is blind. Otherwise, they'll be in deep trouble. -12. Chapter 3560. Master, is this little guy called Little Silver? Can he play with us? Wang Bianfei asked with shining eyes. If you let him stay in the small Chinquan bag all the time, of course he'll get sick of it. This little one thinks it's great to be by your side. Why do they want to leave? I think it's because Master doesn't want them to come out. You're right. Xiaohua nodded and patted Little Silver. Go play with them. If you want to cultivate, come back to me. Yes, Master. Little Silver was more obedient than Little Yellow. He flew up from Xiaohua's shoulder and landed on Wang Bianfei's head, making Wang Bianfei laugh. Seeing the envy in Lu Yi's eyes, Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand. The divine power centipede came out of the space. Xiaohua pointed at Lu Yi and said, You go too. Accompany Lu Yi, and I'll give you benefits in the future. Chirp chirp. The divine power centipede was very happy. Although its expression couldn't be seen, its twisted waist revealed its intentions. It drew a black line in the air and landed on Lu Yi's shoulder. The divine power centipede naturally wasn't as fun as Wang Bianfei. It was even a little scary. However, Lu Yi had seen how powerful it was before, so he naturally knew more than Wang Bianfei. When he plucked up his courage to touch the divine power centipede's cold carapace, the divine power centipede waved its antennae in response. Lu Yi's mood improved greatly. AI, that's right. Although this Zhao's space is good and full of spirit qi, it doesn't have human energy. Who can resist loneliness? Even Lu of Nirvana strives to move forward in the midst of Nirvana. Xiao Hua looked at the four little things' happy and harmonious appearances and secretly made a plan in his heart. Whether it was the yang side of the space or the yin side of the space, they both needed energy. It looked like he would have to spend more effort in the future. I wonder how little yellow and little black are doing? As Xiao Hua pondered, he suddenly thought of the two little ones. In the end, Xiao Hua dismissed the idea of releasing his divine will or Buddhist awareness to check on the two little ones. Since he was going to let go, he might as well leave them behind. There were many things in the world that were difficult to reconcile, and he didn't lack parting with them. Below Xiao Hua, Li Xiang and the others were still riding on their horses. They did not dare to stop and rest. Although these people were cultivators, the torture they suffered in the Jade Mountain prison was several times more than ordinary people. Now, they could not hold on any longer. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept across the flying carriage and ordered them to rest. Then, he walked towards Li Xiang and cupped his fists. Fellow Taoist Li, this Xiao has some matters to attend to. So this Xiao was unable to invite fellow Taoists to ride on the flying carriage. I hope you can understand. Li Xiang was stunned. He did not expect that Xiao Hua's first words would be an apology. When he came back to his senses, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, "The flying carriage is Taoist Zhao's own property. I have already received Taoist Zhao's grace. How can I care about such a small matter?" Hee. It's good that fellow Taoist doesn't mind. Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, please rest for a moment and check out the situation of the disciples first." All right, Li Xiang nodded and said, "Spiritual Master, please return to the flying carriage first. I will report to you later." No need. Xiao Hua reached out his hand and took out some prepared clothes and some pills from his small universe bag. He handed them to Li Xiang and said, "This Xiao can just wait here. Thank you for your trouble, Taoist Xiao." Seeing that Xiao Hua had prepared so thoroughly, Li Xiang was very happy. He cupped his fists and received them. At this time, several disciples came over from behind him. After greeting Xiao Hua, they helped Li Xiang take the clothes and pills back. There was not much to say in the wilderness. Dozens of people helped each other remove the remaining iron chains and torture tools from their bodies. They simply tidied up and changed their clothes. After taking some pills refined by Xiao Hua and resting for a while, they gathered in front of Xiao Hua and bowed again to thank him. Seeing that everyone was still somewhat tired, Xiao Hua smiled and took out some spirit fruits and handed them to Li Xiang, saying, "Fellow Taoist Li, please distribute these to the disciples. After eating, we will rest for a while. It won't be too late to continue our journey when we are full of energy." Li Xiang saw that Xiao Hua respected him very much and did not directly overstep his boundaries. He was even happier in his heart. After receiving the spirit fruit, he first took one for himself, then had someone distribute it to the other disciples. He smiled and said, "Jinren Xiao is really considerate. It has been a long time since I, Li, ate such a good spirit fruit." It's nothing. Fellow Taoist Li suffered a lot in prison. These are all compensation. Xiao Hua waved his hand and looked at the people sitting on the ground. He asked, "How are the disciples?" When his disciples were mentioned, Li Xiang's face became bitter. He shook his head slightly and said, "The situation isn't too good." "Oh?" Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, "Can you tell me the details?" "Actually," Li Xiang smiled bitterly and explained, "the copper pillar state is far from as benevolent as Taoist Xiao thinks. That day, they didn't think about destroying this Li Xiang's nascent soul. It's just that before they used the Confucian secret technique, they suddenly stopped. At that time, the jailer didn't plan to hide this Li Xiang's plan. He directly passed down the order of the Copper Pillar State's king, saying that he wanted to keep this Li Xiang's nascent soul for great use. That's why this Li Xiang's nascent soul was imprisoned. It's not like what the former Jade Mountain Guard General said, keeping fellow Taoist's nascent soul for great use? Xiaohua was somewhat confused. However, he also knew that Li Xiang couldn't possibly know the details. Asking would be pointless. Thus, he said, no matter what, fellow Taoist was able to keep his nascent soul. His 1,000 years of cultivation didn't turn into water. This is already very fortunate. What about your disciples? The disciples under this Li Xiang's tutelage aren't so lucky. Li Xiang said, there are 40 of them. Among them, there are 5 golden core cultivators. The rest are in the heartbeat and spirit silence realms. The 5 disciples' golden cores were completely destroyed. As for the other 40 disciples, more than half of their cultivations were destroyed. Now, they are all mortals. It's that serious. Although Xiaohua said it was serious, his expression didn't change. After all, as Li Xiang said, they were both enemies. He was able to kill Long Qingge and force Yin Jijin to self-detonate. Naturally, the king wouldn't be merciful to Li Xiang and the others. Needless to say, the remaining half of the disciples were naturally all low-level disciples in the heartbeat realm. It was the same logic as how he couldn't completely kill all the ordinary black armored army in front of the Jade Mountain. Li Xiang sighed, I am not talented. Although I have already cultivated to the nascent soul stage, I can be considered a Dao sect grandmaster of the hidden immortal continent. However, I do not have any attainments in the Dao of alchemy. Furthermore, the Dao sect of the hidden immortal continent is declining, and the spirit grass and pill formulas are all controlled by the Confucian cultivators. I'm afraid it will be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Oh, Xiaohua looked at Li Xiang, who was not in a good mood, and laughed. Let those disciples whose cultivations have been destroyed come over. I will help them take a look, and maybe I can help you think of a way. Ah, Taoist Master Xiao? Li Xiang was startled, then immediately became wild with joy. He could not believe his own ears. After all, there was no special connection between strength and alchemy. He used to be the imperial advisor of a country, but he did not have such a method. Xiaohua this. Although he was the imperial advisor, he was actually the imperial advisor in name. What kind of spirit grass could the Jiang country, which no longer existed, provide him with? Xiaohua actually proposed to take a look, and even said that he would think of a way. He must have some confidence. Taoist master, please wait a moment. Li Xiang anxiously turned his head and ordered his disciples to hurry over. Xiaohua had some experience in recovering his cultivation. Nearly 30 cultivators checked one by one, and even asked in detail. Everyone could not suppress their joy as they stared at Xiaohua's face. Unfortunately, other than a faint smile on Xiaohua's face, there was still a faint smile. They could not see anything else, but it was this faint smile that gave them great confidence. Xiaohua was extremely patient, and he checked for an entire hour before raising his head and smiling at Li Xiang. Fellow Taoist Li, there's no need to worry. After the shackles on your nascent soul are removed, I'll make a move with you, and the cultivations of these disciples will surely be able to recover completely. All right, everyone's hearts had been hanging there the entire time. When Xiaohua finally spat it out, they couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief, and their gazes became even more fervent. Taoist master. Li Xiang was also relieved. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. To be honest, in the previous Jade Mountain, he had never thought that he would be able to come out alive, and he was really tired of the days of being the imperial advisor. He had been the imperial advisor twice. The first time was the imperial advisor of the Li Nation. He had racked his brains for the Li Nation, but in the end, the Li Nation was destroyed and he had no choice but to submit to the Jiang country. Fortunately, the Jiang country was also established by the Dao sect, and in order to survive, he had no choice but to become the second imperial advisor of the Jiang country. This was his second time as the imperial advisor. But even so, how could his disciples not have any friction with Qin Haoyue's disciples? Although the hidden immortal continent did not allow Dao sect cultivators to recruit disciples and only allowed Dao sect disciples to serve the country, weren't these disciples their own disciples? How could Li Xiang and Qin Haoyue not know about the friction between their disciples? In addition, Qin Haoyue was not a magnanimous person, so Li Xiang was suspected and probed a lot. Even so, in the end, Li Xiang's cultivation did not increase by much, and instead, because of the destruction of the Jiang country, he was captured by the Copper Pillar State and brought to the Jade Mountain. Xiao Hua saved Li Xiang, and when Xiao Hua revealed his identity, Li Xiang already understood. He had already thought of an excuse, and even when Xiao Hua asked why his cultivation was not crippled, he spoke up for the Jade Mountain's guard general. It was obvious that he did not want to offend the Copper Pillar State, and he did not want to be the master of a country. That was really meaningless. However, Xiao Hua did not invite him to the flying carriage, nor did he mention anything about the Jiang country. Now, he even proposed to help his disciple recover his cultivation. Xiao Hua's words were good. He wanted to attack together with him, but he was very clear in his heart. How could he have such cultivation? This was Xiao Hua giving him face. All right, fellow Taoist Li, please get on the carriage. I have some things to ask you. Xiao Hua did not look at Li Xiang's hesitation and invited with a smile. If there is nothing special about your disciple, we should hurry on our way as soon as possible and talk as we go. After all, if we can reach the Black Cloud Ridge earlier, we can help them recover their cultivation earlier. Chapter 3561. Seeing Xiao Hua like this, Li Xiang could only sigh and smile. I don't dare to ask for advice. Taoist Xiao, please. Then, Li Xiang ordered the disciples to get on their horses and head towards Black Cloud Ridge. Although the disciples couldn't fully recover, when they heard that reaching Black Cloud Ridge a day earlier meant that they could recover their cultivation a day earlier, how could they not get on their horses? Even the disciples who still had their cultivation hurriedly activated their cultivation techniques, hoping to be able to fly as soon as possible. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the Pegasus flew down. Xiao Hua ordered Lu Yi and Wang Beifei to get off and ride the horse that Li Xiang was riding before, while he invited Li Xiang to get on the flying carriage. When the Pegasus rose into the sky again, Li Xiang and the other disciples also started to hurry on. Ai, Taoist Xiao. Li Xiang sat on the flying carriage and looked at the shining Pegasus in front of him and sighed. Using this Pegasus? Isn't it too ostentatious? Aren't you afraid that Confucian cultivators will be jealous? Hee, this Xiao has done many things that would make Confucian cultivators jealous. This one won't make a difference. Xiao Hua laughed and didn't mind. This one won't make a difference? Li Xiang said with a smile. Taoist Xiao took the Zhu clan's ancestral item right in front of me. Although this Li doesn't know what it is, since even the king of Bronze Pillar country was moved, it must be something that Confucian cultivators would be jealous of. This Xiao also doesn't know what it is. Xiao Hua clapped his hand, and a fingernail-sized bone appeared in his hand. At that time, this Xiao only thought that this item would be of some use to this Xiao, and could also help the pitiful Zhu family resist the disaster, so I accepted it. Ai, that Zhu clan's head is too calculative. Li Xiang was naturally more calculative than Xiao Hua and sighed slightly. This item is hidden in the flesh. If this Li guessed correctly, it should be condensed together with the bone. Even if you used the clear eyes technique, you wouldn't be able to find it. The previous general of Jade Mountain used who knows how many methods to interrogate the whereabouts of this item, but he never thought that it would be in someone's calf. Moreover, the moment the Zhu clan's head escaped danger, he immediately took out this item without hesitation. He kept saying that he was grateful to Taoist Xiao, but he really had evil intentions. If this Li was this Li would definitely turn around and leave at that time and ignore him. Taoist Xiao is too kind. Taoist Li's head's hand? Xiao Hua asked with interest. Li Xiang replied without hesitation, even if I take this item, I will definitely make the generals of the Jade Mountains swear a blood oath. I will even force the king of the Bronze Pillar country to swear that no one will speak of this matter. That Zhu family head will go for wool and come home shorn. Haha, it's not that bad. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Sometimes, suffering losses is a blessing. If not for the fact that Zhu Cheng was forced into a dead end, he might not have handed over the inheritance of his family to this Xiao. The reason why he did this was because he was thinking about the future of the Zhu clan, right? Xiao, T, S het, SSS have, S is Zhao Xiang's. SAS Xiao Hua laughed. Ha ha ha, fellow Taoist Li is really good at joking. S Xiao's, head, S, Zhao's. Don't even mention how much trouble this Xiao will have to bear for this item. Li Xiang laughed. Even the Buddha Kingdom's old Baldy wouldn't be able to do such a thing. Xiaohua put away the bone. Li Xiang didn't ask any more questions. Xiaohua's. Xiaohua waited for Li Xiang to sit down before saying, "If Taoist Xiao is at ease, then let me take a look at your nascent soul and see if I can help you break the seal." "Of course I'm at ease." Li Xiang shook his head. "But the seal on my nascent soul was made by a Confucian cultivator. I can't sense my nascent soul at all. Even if I use a technique, my nascent soul won't move. I'm afraid I'll have to find a Confucian cultivator's friend and ask them to help." But then, he smiled bitterly. "Moreover, this seal was made by the Copper Pillar State's Longqinga. If I want to break it, I'll have to find someone with a higher cultivation than him. I'm afraid they'll have to be at the 5th level of the Origin Energy Great Grandmaster. Secondly, the Great Grandmaster has to be afraid of the Copper Pillar States. Difficult." But then, Li Xiang suddenly froze. In his mind, the scene of Xiao Hua spitting out a flying sword and chopping off the chains on his body appeared. Then, he thought about how Xiao Hua took the Zhu clan's ancestral treasure without hesitation. He almost blurted out, "Taoist master? Could it be, you also know Confucian cultivation techniques?" "Just so. Xiao Hua smiled. "My cultivation isn't good enough. I can barely kill Longqinga." "Ah, Longqinga was killed by Taoist Xiao?" Li Xiang was even more shocked. "Yes, Yin Jijin is also dead," Xiao Hua said indifferently, "just in front of the Jade Mountain." Li Xiang was stunned for a long time before coming back to his senses. He nodded and said, "I finally understand why the Jade Mountain's Guardian General was so respectful to Taoist Xiao. Even General Hao, who stood at the top of the mountain and didn't dare to say a word. Oh, looks like Zhu Cheng really went for wool and came home shorn. This is called suffering a loss as a blessing," Xiao Hua corrected. "Now, Taoist Xiao can rest assured and let me take a look." Of course. At this point, how could Li Xiang not be at ease with Xiao Hua? How could he not let Xiao Hua take a look? After obtaining Li Xiang's permission, Xiao Hua extended his hand and pointed his index finger at Li Xiang's lower dantian. A thin, almost inaudible crystal thread came out from his index finger. After watching the crystal thread enter Li Xiang's body, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking. Li Xiang looked at Xiao Hua's expression. It was actually the same as the previous disciples, with a smile on his face. Li Xiang's heart also rose to his throat. Fortunately, after half a cup of tea's time, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and said with a smile, "Taoistly, this restriction was set up by the Bronze Pillar State using the 5-brocade cloud diagram. If you don't know the 5-brocade cloud diagram, I'm afraid it won't be easy to break it." Li Xiang clearly hadn't heard of the 5-brocade cloud diagram. His face revealed disappointment. He forced a smile and said, "Many thanks, Taoist Xiao. Since you know the origin of the restriction, I'll find someone to break it later." "Haha, Taoistly, why didn't you let me finish?" Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This 5-brocade cloud diagram was also the killing array that Longqinga had set up in the Black Cloud Ridge that day. This Xiao killed Longqinga and just happened to destroy this array. That array diagram is now in this Xiao's hands." Phew. Li Xiang let out a breath of relief. He wasn't surprised anymore. After all, Xiao Hua gave him too many surprises. "Oh?" Xiao Hua saw that Li Xiang's face didn't show any joy. He felt strange and asked, "What? Could it be that Taoist Li doesn't believe me?" Li Xiang helplessly shook his head. "Taoist Xiao, I feel that there isn't any difficulty for you at all. I'm too lazy to be happy." "Haha, Taoist Li's words are good. I like it very much." Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, "If Taoist Li is anxious, I can break the restriction in your body right now." "Many thanks, Taoist Xiao." It would be a lie to say that he wasn't anxious. A nascent soul cultivator suddenly turned into a mortal. The sense of insecurity in his heart was far greater than others. Li Xiang hurriedly cupped his hands and said. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "However, I'm afraid that I can't let Taoist Li see the method to break the restriction." "No worries," Li Xiang hurriedly said with a smile. "Right now, I'm the fish and Taoist Xiao is the knife. As long as Taoist Xiao doesn't chop me into fish paste, it's fine." Ha ha. Xiao Hua laughed and patted the heavenly horse. The heavenly horse neighed and rushed into the sky with the flying carriage. In a moment, it disappeared from everyone's eyes. The restriction on Li Xiang's nascent soul came from the 5 brocade cloud diagram. Not only could the 5 brocade cloud diagram be broken, even the 5 Qi thunder could also break it. Xiao Hua even thought about whether or not he should use the heaven cleansing earth technique to try it. However, seeing that the nascent soul in Li Xiang's lower dantian was already extremely weak, Xiao Hua was afraid that he might injure this nascent soul and damage Li Xiang's Dao foundation. As the saying goes, those who don't know how to do it are not difficult for those who know how to do it. In Li Xiang's eyes, the seemingly extremely difficult restriction was broken by Xiao Hua in the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Li Xiang opened his eyes and sensed his body. His nascent soul had already returned to normal, and there was nothing abnormal about his body. Although he didn't know if Xiao Hua did anything to him, looking at Xiao Hua's very calm expression, he didn't think too much. After all, Xiao Hua didn't need to go through so much trouble. Daoist Xiao, do you have a jade phosphorus pill? After checking his nascent soul, Li Xiang didn't hold back and simply asked Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua shook his head. I don't have a jade phosphorus pill. Li Xiang was slightly disappointed and said with a smile, my nascent soul was injured. If I cultivate in peace, I'm afraid it will take several years to recover. When I was captured, all my medicinal pills, magic weapons, and other things fell into the bronze pillar state. When Daoist Xiao rescued me, the guarding general didn't return my Chinkuan bag. Presumably, those things aren't in the Jade Mountain, and my jade phosphorus pill is in my Chinkuan bag. I don't have a jade phosphorus pill, but I have a nourishing spirit pill and a clearly pill, Xiao Hua said with a smile and took out 2 jade bottles. Nourishing spirit pill? Clearly pill? Li Xiang frowned. He had never heard of the names of these 2 medicinal pills. Oh, nourishing spirit pill is used to repair divine sense, and clearly pill is used by golden core cultivators. Xiao Hua explained, I don't have medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators like me, so I ask for fellow Taoist Li's forgiveness. Li Xiang smiled bitterly. How could the medicinal pills used by golden core cultivators and nascent soul cultivators be the same? However, when he thought about it, Xiao Hua wasn't a real state preceptor, so how could he have real medicinal pills? Fellow Taoist Li, take it first. It's better than nothing. Xiao Hua handed over the jade bottles and said, if fellow Taoist Li has the pill recipe, I can actually refine a jade phosphorus pill for fellow Taoist Li, hee. The jade phosphorus pill's pill recipe is in the hands of state preceptor Qin Haoyue. I don't have it. Li Xiang's words were not without resentment. When I was the state preceptor in Li country, I also entrusted others to refine medicinal pills. The pill recipe I obtained later is also in my Chinkuan bag. -12. Chapter 3562. After Li Xiang finished speaking, he looked at the jade bottle that Xiao Hua handed to him. After pondering for a bit, he reached out and took it. After all, Xiao Hua was right. Something is better than nothing. His nascent soul is weak. Any kind of medicinal pill is fine. Looking at the ugly medicinal pill in his hand, Li Xiang's face revealed a strange expression as expected. However, after he took the soul-nourishing pill, his face became brilliant. At first, he was stunned. Then he became ecstatic. Immediately after, he sat down cross-legged and didn't speak anymore. This cultivation lasted for 2 hours. Xiao Hua also didn't disturb Li Xiang. He drove the flying carriage down from the sky and flew above the heads of the disciples who were galloping on their horses. Woo-woo. Above Li Xiang's head, a faint buzzing sound could be heard. Then, a whirlwind appeared in midair. The whirlwind grew bigger and bigger, from a few feet wide to several feet wide. Then, the pressure of a yuanying stage cultivator appeared and spread out in all directions. Xiao Hua didn't care, but Li Xiang's disciples below him were overjoyed. One by one, they pulled their horses and waited on the ground. Under Li Xiang's pressure, the horses' hooves trembled, as if they couldn't stand steadily. Hee. Xiao Hua slightly smiled and patted the back of the Pegasus. The Pegasus once again soared into the sky and flew for several hundred feet before stopping. Li Xiang's pressure continued to increase. In the end, Even the Pegasus was somewhat uneasy, snorting from its mouth and nose. Xiao Hua slightly frowned, pondering whether he should wake Li Xiang or not. Fortunately, after another moment, Li Xiang slowly opened his eyes. That pressure was immediately absorbed into Li Xiang's Niwen palace like a falling tide. Hee, congratulations, fellow Taoist Li, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Alas, I still have to thank Taoist Master Xiao. Li Xiang couldn't help but sigh again. I underestimated Taoist Master's so-called gold core medicinal pill. It actually has such a strong healing effect on my divine sense. I feel that my divine sense is going to have a breakthrough again. Then I have to congratulate fellow Taoist even more, Xiao Hua said. There are still many in the jade bottle, enough for fellow Taoists to use. I'm now even more curious about fellow Taoists' clearly pill. Li Xiang couldn't help but open the other jade bottle and poured out an equally ugly clearly pill. Xiao Hua smiled and said, Fellow Taoist, you should stay here first. Fellow Taoist disciple is very concerned about you. These children have really suffered under this Li. Li Xiang's face revealed a smile when he mentioned his disciples. As the heavenly horse landed, Li Xiang and the rest of his disciples were all laughing and congratulating their imperial advisor. In reality, their master's cultivation had recovered. Li Xiang said a few words of encouragement, and everyone continued to move forward. In anticipation, Li Xiang took the Clearly Dan. But this time the Clearly Dan did not give Li Xiang a special surprise. Although the medicinal power of the Clearly Dan was very good, it was just a drop in the bucket for a Yuanying stage cultivator. Seeing that Li Xiang had only opened his eyes for a moment, Xiao Hua naturally knew that Li Xiang was disappointed. However, he just smiled and didn't say anything. How could he not take a good pill himself? Although he had the metal essence Thriving Marrow now, he did not dare to give it to Li Xiang. Spiritual items of heaven and earth were not something that ordinary cultivators could use at will. Although Li Xiang's meridians were tough, they were still far from Xiao Hua's. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth contained in the metal essence Thriving Marrow would definitely cause Li Xiang's meridians to collapse like a mountain flood. As for the 5 Qi Righteous Thunder, not to mention Li Xiang's Yuanying, even if Li Xiang used his own life magic treasure, he would not be able to resist it. Wanting to use the 5 Qi Righteous Thunder to refine his Yuanying was simply dreaming. Li Xiang was helpless and could only continue to take the Clearly Dan. After a few days, the Black Cloud Ridge was already in sight. Along the way, there were no pursuers from the Copper Pillar State. Instead, they met a few groups of Confucian cultivators. Confucian cultivators were indeed somewhat different from Taoist disciples. Most of the Confucian cultivators only revealed admiration in their eyes. They took a few more glances at Xiao Hua's heavenly horse and flying chariot, but did not look for trouble. Only 2 or 3 people who were obviously reindeer followed for a while. When Xiao Hua sighed with emotion, they were frightened by Li Xiang's spiritual sense and fled. This is the Black Cloud Ridge? Although he had yet to reach the Black Cloud Ridge, Li Xiang could not help but release his spiritual sense. After all, Li Xiang naturally knew the original appearance of the Black Cloud Ridge, and even knew about the Black Cloud Ridge's origin stone mines. Furthermore, when he was at the previous Jade Mountain, Xiao Hua had already mentioned the Black Cloud Ridge, so how could Li Xiang not be curious? Seeing the current appearance of the Black Cloud Ridge, Li Xiang did not want to be surprised, but he was still surprised. How could this be the Black Cloud Ridge in his impression? Xiao Hua laughed and said, This is naturally not the real Black Cloud Ridge. Fellow Taoist Li, take a closer look. Oh? Li Xiang was slightly startled. He released his spiritual sense again and carefully probed, but after a full meal, Li Xiang suddenly raised his eyebrows, opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not say anything. He looked again, and in the end, he sighed deeply and said, The Taoist master actually set up a great formation in the entire Black Cloud Ridge. This is truly something that I would never have dreamed of. Even the entire Jiang country would not be able to complete it. Heh. Xiao Hua laughed and urged the heaven horse to descend. Li Xiang suddenly thought of something and hurriedly asked, Oh right, this Black Cloud Ridge is underground? There seems to be an origin stone mine. Jiang country, Copper Pillar Country and Jiasa Country are mining it separately. Let's not talk about the Copper Pillar Country. What about the Jiasa Country? Naturally, they were chased away by this Xiao. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, previously, the soldiers of the Jiang country had all submitted to the Jiasa country after the destruction of the Jiang country. Why would I keep them? Oh, Li Xiang nodded absent-mindedly. He finally understood what Xiao Hua meant when he said, I've done a lot of things that make Confucian cultivators jealous. This origin stone mine was probably even more eye-catching than the Zhu family's inheritance, right? Furthermore, Xiao Hua had even openly offended the Jiasa country, which was the closest to the Black Cloud Ridge and was established by the Buddhist sect. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer to the Black Cloud Ridge and did not see any spirit demon patrolling, Xiao Hua was a little displeased. He raised his hand and was about to cast a spell when he heard a sharp eagle cry from high up in the sky. Two shadows that were about 3 meters in size descended from the clouds, and the wings of the two birds of prey blocked the sunlight above Xiao Hua and the others. Io, that's right, there are still 3 demon kings in the Black Cloud Ridge. Li Xiang suddenly realized, could it be that Taoist master Xiao killed them all? Is this Xiao that cruel? Xiao Hua pinched his chin, looking very innocent. The two birds of prey circled a few times above Xiao Hua's head, and with 2 cries, they descended towards the Black Cloud Ridge. A moment later, the 2 birds of prey charged into the sky again, still hidden behind the clouds. On the Black Cloud Ridge, light suddenly flashed, and the scene in front of everyone's eyes twisted strangely a few times. From midair to the ground, a crack dozens of meters in size appeared out of nowhere. This crack was like a large door, flowing with light and splendor. The 3 demon kings brought a dozen little demons, and behind them, Qin Xiaoyao, Xiao Jin, Chongling, and the others flew out, respectfully standing on both sides of the door. When Xiao Hua's horse landed, they all bowed and said, Welcome back, master. Get up, see who's here. Xiao Hua smiled and stood up, helping everyone up, and flew down from the flying carriage with Li Xiang. Junior greets Taoist Master Li. We greet State Preceptor Li. The Black Bear Spirit and the others ignored Li Xiang. Qin Xiaoyao, the Chongling Princess, and the other people of Jiang country were very happy to see Li Xiang, and hurriedly bowed. Haha, all of you, get up. Li Xiang waved his hand, looking much more practiced than Xiao Hua. He said with a smile, seeing you all safe and sound, this old man is reassured. Then, Li Xiang bowed to the Chongling Princess alone and said, This Li greets the princess. The Chongling Princess's eyes were slightly red, and she hurriedly returned the greeting. State Preceptor, no need to be so courteous. Chongling is no longer a princess. In the future, I will have to rely on State Preceptor and Master. Haha. The Chongling Princess's words naturally had a double meaning, but Li Xiang did not respond. As they spoke, Li Xiang's disciples arrived on their horses. Qin Xiaoyao and the others were very happy and hurried forward to greet them, helping them down from their horses. Xiaoyao, help arrange for Taoist Master Li's disciples. We will talk in the cave. Xiao Hua looked at the joyful crowd and ordered, Yes, this disciple knows. Qin Xiaoyao immediately answered, Also, Black Bear, prepare a banquet to welcome Taoist Master Li and the others. Yes, this lowly one knows. Old Master, do not worry. The Black Bear Spirit patted his chest and left with the Golden Eagle and White Lion. Li Xiang looked at the orderly Black Cloud Ridge and the appearance of the 3 Yao Kings. He was filled with curiosity. These Yao could be called kings. Their strength spoke for themselves, and their personalities were unruly. It was easy to kill them, but difficult to make them lower themselves. He did not understand how Xiao Hua had done it. After entering the cave, the people of Black Cloud Ridge took their seats. Lui and Wang Yifei stood on either side of Xiao Hua. Little Silver and the Divine Power Centipede did not go back into the space and stayed on their shoulders. Li Xiang's seat was not far from Xiao Hua's. It was a guest seat. Li Xiang was very satisfied and sat down as well. Looking at the magnificent cave, he sighed, Spiritual Master Xiao, I've been to this Black Cloud Ridge before. It was not like this at all. I didn't expect that in Spiritual Master Zhao's hands, It would turn something rotten into something magical. Haha, this is not my doing. Xiao Hua laughed and said, this is a big gift from Lung Chinga. Saying this, Xiao Hua told him about the situation of Lung Chinga setting up the array in Black Cloud Ridge, and then briefly described what had happened. Finally, he glanced at the cave and said, Taoist Masterly, now everything is ready in Black Cloud Ridge. We only need one thing to help Princess Ling establish her country. Can you give me a hand? This, Li Xiang smiled bitterly, knowing that what was to come would come in the end. Although his cultivation had been restored, many of his disciples had not. Xiao Hua had used this weakness to make him submit, so he really couldn't refuse. However, he didn't want to repeat the same mistakes as before, so he tried to shirk the responsibility. This matter is of great importance, so let this Li carefully consider it. -12. Li Xiang laughed and said, since it is not allowed to establish a sect, then take charge of a country. Now that Jiang country has been destroyed, if Taoist Master Xiao establishes Jiang country again, naturally you can name it Fortune country. You can even call it Xiao country. Taoist Master Xiao is building this country into an empire with vast territory. Taoist Master Li. Xiao Hua interrupted Li Xiang's words, shaking his head and saying, this Xiao has already promised the Chongling princess to help her restore her country. Wouldn't doing this chill her heart? This Xiao also become a person who goes back on his words? That's even simpler. Li Xiang laughed and said, Taoist Master Xiao can just support another country. Yes, that's true. Xiao Hua woke from a dream, slapped his forehead, but then he grimaced. The problem is, isn't controlling a country different from a sect? There has to be a country ruler. If there is a country ruler, wouldn't there be a rift between us? Li Xiang laughed and said, use Taoist Master Zhao's own bloodline to be the country ruler. This Xiao country is justified. Forget it, forget it. Let's talk about it later. As Xiao Hua spoke, he actually walked into the trap. He simply waved his hand and said, this Xiao made a sect to simplify things, to be a hands-off shopkeeper. Now that I heard Taoist Master Li say that he also wants to marry and have children, wouldn't that be troublesome? Ha ha ha. Li Xiang also laughed. The two spoke a few more words. Seeing the sun rise from the mountain peak, Xiao Hua smiled and said, Taoist Master Li, send a disciple up. You and I will see how to help them recover their cultivation. All right. Li Xiang saw that Xiao Hua was so straightforward and was happy in his heart. He transmitted his voice, and not long after, a Jin Dan disciple came up. Xiao Hua took Li Xiang and the disciple into the quiet room. Xiao Hua only slightly checked the injury and already understood that this disciple's Jin Dan was broken. His lower dantian was pierced by the sword qi of the Confucian cultivator, and some of the meridians in his body were also cut off by the sword qi. As long as the meridians and dantian were repaired, Jin Dan would not be difficult. So Xiao Hua pretended to discuss with Li Xiang for a moment, took out the heaven-mending pill, explained to Li Xiang how to use it, and let Li Xiang help his disciple. Li Xiang looked at the pill in his hand, his mouth bitter. How could he not understand that as long as he had this heaven-mending pill, why would he need to do it himself? Why would Xiao Hua need to discuss with him? He really couldn't understand. How many elixirs could Xiao Hua have in this small Chinkuan bag? After the disciple took the heaven-mending pill, Li Xiang used his divine sense to explore for a moment. He knew that the heaven-mending pill's effect was godly, and it was repairing the meridians and dantian at a speed visible to the naked eye. But then, Li Xiang worriedly asked, Taoist Master Xiao, this pill is really miraculous. But do you know how many? Enough. Seeing this, Xiao Hua simply clapped his hand, and a sufficient number of jade bottles were sent in front of Li Xiang. Li Xiang was so shocked that a walnut could be stuffed in his mouth. A single heaven-mending pill was already incomparably precious, but Xiao Hua actually gave him dozens of pills the moment he opened his mouth. Too much. Li Xiang muttered. His raised hand was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. The jade bottles were easy to put away, but his heart was too heavy. No matter. Xiao Hua said with a smile, everyone in Black Cloud Ridge is more precious than this pill. Hearing Xiao Hua's words that did not treat him as an outsider, and thinking back to Qin Haoyue's guarded appearance, Li Xiang's heart was somewhat shaken. Taoist Master Li, you help the disciples recover their cultivation here. I will go take a look at the source stone mine. Xiao Hua stood up and said with a smile, that is the vital point of Black Cloud Ridge. We cannot lose it. After saying this, without waiting for Li Xiang to speak, Xiao Hua stood up and walked out of the quiet room. Outside the quiet room, Lu Yi and Wang Bianfei stood below the high platform, both sitting cross-legged with their eyes slightly closed. Wang Bianfei was somewhat lively as he scurried around, but the god power centipede was quite well behaved as it lay on the ground. The black qi around its body expanding and contracting as if it was breathing, as if it was cultivating. Seeing this, Xiao Hua smiled mightily. With a wave of his hand, Little Silver and the god power centipede both flew onto his shoulder. Then, Xiao Hua rode a magic cloud and flew towards the source stone mine. Fortunately, although many of the demons in the front mountain had not yet sobered up, the entrance to the source stone mine was guarded by a white lion. From time to time, demons would enter and exit the mine, and it looked like they were mining source stones. Seeing Xiao Hua fly over, the white lion immediately came over and respectfully greeted him. Greetings, master. Rise. White lion. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Why are you up so early? Didn't you drink last night? Hearing Xiao Hua mention wine, the white lion unconsciously stuck out its scarlet tongue and licked its lips. Smiling, it said, Master, of course this little one drank. However, this little one felt that the spirit wine that Master bestowed upon this little one was rather rare, so I left some for my subordinates who profited from it. I didn't enjoy much of it myself. Moreover, it's this little one's turn to be on duty today. This little one didn't dare to delay Master's matters, so I came early. Good. Xiao Hua was very happy to hear this. Although the black bear spirit was loyal, it was really lazy and especially timid. This white lion, on the other hand, seemed to be a cautious and attentive one. Saying this, Xiao Hua flipped his hand and took out a jade pot, handing it to the white lion. This is a reward from this old man. The spirit wine in Xiao Hua's space was now brewed by Xiao Gui out of boredom. The wine's fragrance assailed the nostrils, and the color was sparkling and translucent. It was who knew how many times better than the wine brewed by ordinary cultivators. No wonder a demon like the white lion was greedy. -12. Chapter 3564. Thank you for your reward, Master. White Lion was overjoyed and received the wine with both hands. His Adam's apple unconsciously gulped a few times. How's the situation at the elemental stone mine? Xiao Hua asked after White Lion kept the wine. White Lion explained the situation of the elemental stone mine in detail. Xiao Hua actually didn't know how the real elemental stone mine was mined, but hearing White Lion's orderly explanation, he nodded repeatedly. White Lion was even more delighted to see Xiao Hua's approval. After White Lion finished speaking, he saw a few more demons coming out of the cave with cloth bags and other items in their hands. When they reached a place not far from the cave, they shook their hands and opened the cloth bags. A large pile of bones tumbled out. Xiao Hua frowned and scanned with his divine sense. His expression changed unconsciously, and he said in a cold voice, White Lion, what's with this pit full of bones? Oh, reporting to Master. White Lion wasn't afraid and smiled. These were all cleared out from the elemental stone mine. I'm afraid that the mine soldiers of the three kingdoms died in the mine and were casually thrown in here. When we saw these bones while mining, we told Big Brother. Big Brother knows that Master is kind and likes cleanliness, so he asked us to clear these bones out and place them in this pit. When the time comes, we'll bury them all. Good. You've worked hard. Xiao Hua patted White Lion's shoulder and encouraged, I'll go find some cultivation methods that demons can cultivate and teach you in the future. Thank you, Master. White Lion was excited and immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Although they were demon kings, in reality, they were just small leaders of the demons. They relied on their talent and didn't have any particularly complete cultivation methods. Wanting to improve their strength was simply a dream. White Lion had a deep understanding of Xiao Hua's cultivation. Moreover, in Xiao Hua's eyes, there was no difference between demons and humans. Since he said that he would guide them in their cultivation, he would naturally guide them. This was much more practical than some kind of spiritual wine or any so-called bestowment. Get up, Xiaohua says with a smile. This old man is just talking about it now. This old man doesn't even know where to find the cultivation technique that the evil spirit cultivates. Speaking up to this point, Xiaohua's mind flashed as he came to a realization. That's right, the Copper Pillar Nation's star-plucking tower. Other nations must also have their own auctions. My Black Cloud Ridge has an elemental or mine. Why would I be afraid of not being able to find cultivation techniques? Baisher, tell He Xiong about this, and then discuss it with Qin Xiaoyao or Xiaojian. Let them send some disciples out to bid. Yes, I understand, Baisher replied respectfully. Soon after, Xiaohua entered the essence stone mine and went to the deepest part. He collected more essence stones before coming up. In just a dozen days, Xiaohua's mind and primordial spirit had improved greatly. The amount of essence stones he collected was more than 10% more than the previous time. While Xiaohua was overjoyed, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. The effect of this secret technique far surpassed any secret technique he had ever seen. He really didn't know where Do Shanjun had obtained this mysterious secret technique. Could it be that my appearance can't compare to that guy's, and my character can't compare to his? After Xiaohua cursed in his heart, he flew to the front of Dao Shan's tomb. Dao Shan's tomb already had weeds, but fortunately, when the 5-brocade cloud diagram array bombarded the Black Cloud Ridge, this place was not affected too much, and the tomb was still there. Xiaohua squatted down, extended his hand, and pulled out the weeds near the tomb one by one. He stared at the small tomb for a long time, as if he was thinking about something, but also as if he was comprehending something. After half a day, he finally stood up and flew towards the cave. However, before he could reach the cave, Xiaohua stopped again. He saw that not far from the cave was a military camp, and on the east side of the military camp was a hill that wasn't too steep. Right now, there was a person holding an axe and dancing on the side of the hill. Who else could this person be other than Yuanya? Xiaohua watched for a moment and saw that Yuanya's axe technique was extremely methodical. It was obvious that someone had taught him. He couldn't help but smile and descended from the sky. Yuanya was the first person he saw in the hidden immortal continent. Now that there were many people in the Black Cloud Ridge, Xiaohua didn't have time to care about Yuanya. Previously, he had asked Louis once, but there was no news. Dao, Master. Hearing the commotion, Yuanya put away the demon axe, hurriedly bowed and called out. It seemed that he was going to call him Taoist Master, but when he was about to say it, he changed his words. Looking at Yuanya, Xiaohua was quite emotional. People would always change. It had only been a little more than a year. A young man who was lying on a tree in the Jiangqiao temple and peeking at him practicing his fist techniques now knew how to deal with people and adapt to changes. Yeah, how are you now? Xiaohua said with a smile. Master, this one is very well. Yuanya did not speak much, and his answers were very proper. Xiaohua knew Yuanya's personality and asked, What about Chongling? How is her and your master's plan to revive the country? Why are you not with her? Master, Chongling and Master are working day and night, and have sent out many soldiers, and also issued many orders. Looking at Chongling, it seems to be going smoothly. The smile on her face is increasing. As to the exact extent, this one does not know. This one can only cultivate as much as possible so that I can protect her on the battlefield in the future. Who taught you this axe technique? It looks very good. Xiaohua asked with interest. General Kong Li taught me. Xiaohua chatted with Yuanya for a while, and then asked probingly, that? Chongling still does not admit that she is Diawu? You did not think that you were mistaken? At the mention of Diawu, Yuanya was slightly bashful. He said with a smile, Master, this one will not be mistaken. However, right now, Chongling is focused on reviving the country. This one cannot distract her. After Jiang country revives, let's talk about it? You are very right. Xiaohua nodded and then said, however, you also need to focus on cultivating and protecting Chongling for Elder Mo. If there is nothing, you need to be by her side. You may not be able to ask about her well-being, but if you see her unhappy, you can think of ways to make her happy. Master, This one does not understand. Yuan Ye's face was slightly red as he answered honestly. Xiao Hua was speechless and said helplessly, "All right, you should cultivate. If you have any questions about cultivation, you can ask Qin Xiaoyao or Lu Yi. If that does not work, come find this old man." "All right, master," Yuan Ye answered. "This one has nothing to ask for now." "All right then." Xiao Hua knew that it was boring to talk to Yuan Ye, but he had not expected it to be even more boring now. He could only wave his hand and fly into the air. Yuan Ye did not respectfully send Master off like the black bear spirit. He looked at Xiao Hua's back and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, a smile from the bottom of his heart. When he returned to the residence, only Li Xiang was sitting cross-legged in the seclusion room. His disciples were gone. They must have taken the sky-mending pill and been chased out by Li Xiang. Seeing Xiao Hua return, Li Xiang hurriedly stood and took out several jade bottles. He said with a smile, "This one's disciples have taken Taoist Zhao's spirit pills. These are the remaining ones. Taoist, please accept them." "Haha, Taoist Li, there is no need to be so courteous with this one." Xiao Hua waved his hand, resolutely refusing to accept. "Our friendship is still shallow. You don't know this, but this Xiao will never let go of anything that falls into this Xiao's hands, and this Xiao will never accept anything that this Xiao gives away. All right, since Taoist Xiao is so straightforward, then this one will accept." Li Xiang did not say much. He put away the jade bottles and said, "Taoist Xiao, this one and my disciples are indebted to you for saving our lives. Moreover, this one and my disciples have not fully recovered, so it is not safe for us to go elsewhere. Therefore, this one has decided to accept Taoist Zhao's invitation and stay in the Black Cloud Ridge for a while until Taoist Xiao returns from the Jade Pavilion gathering." "Good." Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, "Thank you. Taoist Li, however, I still have a condition," Li Xiang said with a straight face. Xiao Hua was stunned and said curiously, "Taoist Li, please speak. If this one can satisfy you, this one will definitely agree." "The spirit wine that Taoist Xiao took out yesterday tasted very good. This one does not have many hobbies, but I like to taste wine." Li Xiang blinked and said, "If Taoist Xiao asks this one to stay, then I will need a jar of spirit wine every day." "Haha, no problem." Xiao Hua did not expect Li Xiang to joke with him. He clapped his hands and took out a few jade bottles and said with a smile, "Taoist Li, please taste these first. When this one goes to the Jade Pavilion gathering, I will leave behind enough spirit wine." "Thank you." Li Xiang did like the spirit wine, but fundamentally speaking, it was just an excuse. Why would he care if Xiao Hua took out more spirit wine? He reached out to take the spirit wine and agreed to the matter. Soon after, Xiao Hua sat down again. He waved his hand and took out a row of magic tools. He said with a smile, "Not only the spirit wine, this one also has some magic tools. Taoist Li, please take a look. Which ones are suitable for your disciples?" Li Xiang was startled. Any cultivator's magic tool, if it wasn't bestowed by their masters, then it was obtained by their own luck. Gifts from others were extremely rare. For someone like Xiao Hua, who gave away a pile of magic tools in one go, other than those unrated magic tools used by Dao soldiers, which cultivators' magic tools could be given away like this? If Xiao Hua regarded his disciples as Taoist soldiers, wouldn't that be slapping his own face? However, Li Xiang knew that Xiao Hua was not such a mean person. Moreover, with a sweep of his divine sense, he immediately knew the rarity of these magic tools. Li Xiang hurriedly stood up and waved his hand, saying, "Taoist Xiao, this one and this one's disciples have received too much help from Taoist Xiao. Why don't Taoists keep these magic tools in your hands and wait for a fated person in the future?" "Taoist Li, what is fated? What is not fated?" Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Taoist Zhao's disciples meeting this one is fated. This one has these magic tools in his hands is fated. Why is Taoist Xiao so polite?" "Alas, okay." Li Xiang casually picked up a magic tool and looked at it carefully. He found that this magic tool was definitely refined by a great refiner. It was far better than what he had seen before. Of course, he was not willing to let his disciples lose this opportunity, so he could only grit his teeth and agree. -12. Chapter 3565. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "It's a pity that I don't have the magic treasure you want, and I'm afraid that none of your Jindan disciples are suitable. My magic treasure was taken away by Long Chinga. I'm afraid it's sealed somewhere in the Bronze Pillar State." Li Xiang smiled bitterly. "After I recover my cultivation, I'll go to the Bronze Pillar State and maybe I can get it. As for my useless Jindan disciples, let them find a few magic treasures to use first." Xiao Hua nodded. "You can tell Xiao Yao about this and let him go to the auction to buy some suitable magic treasures." "I know." Li Xiang nodded, and then Xiao Hua asked Lu Yi to call in Li Xiang's many disciples. Each disciple chose a magic treasure. These disciples, including the Jindan disciples, all had joy in their eyes. They all bowed and thanked Xiao Hua. After the disciples left, Li Xiang returned the rest of the magic treasures to Xiao Hua and said, "Jinren Xiao, I heard you say that you're going to the Yaodai gathering. How much do you know about it?" Xiao Hua slightly shakes his head. "I know very little about the Yaodai gathering. Other than knowing that we Taoist cultivators must participate in the Yaodai gathering if we want to be teachers of a country, here is the approximate location of the Yaodai gathering." Li Xiang nodded, looked at Xiao Hua and said word by word, "If I hadn't been to the Black Cloud Ridge before, maybe I would have advised you to go to the Yaodai gathering. But look at the current situation of the Black Cloud Ridge. Look at Zhenren Zhao's spirit of killing the state preceptor of the Bronze Pillar State, and I heard that Zhenren Xiao also erected a Daoist stone tablet in the Bronze Pillar State. I advise you not to go to the Yaodai gathering and walk into a trap." Xiao Hua was shocked. He knew that Li Xiang was the state preceptor of the Li Kingdom and must have participated in the Yaodai gathering. He wanted to ask for advice, but he didn't expect Li Xiang to advise him not to go. He also said that the Yaodai gathering was a trap, which really confused him. "What does Zhenrenli mean?" Xiao Hua asked in a low voice. "To tell you the truth, Zhenren Xiao, when I went to the Yaodai gathering to fight for the position of the state preceptor, I had the same idea as Zhenren Xiao. I wanted to be an influential figure on the hidden immortal continent and make achievements that no one before me could achieve." Li Xiang's eyes flashed with a trace of fanaticism, as if he was recalling his glorious days. However, this fanaticism disappeared in a flash, followed by helplessness and bitterness. "It's a pity that we took the wrong path from the beginning. How could we reach the peak if the direction was wrong?" Xiao Hua looked at Li Xiang with a smile and didn't interrupt him. Li Xiang looked like he was in his 20s. Presumably, he had altered his appearance after reaching the nascent soul stage. However, from his tone, he seemed to have experienced a lot. Xiao Hua also knew that Li Xiang was a person with a story and had more experience than him. Calmly listening to his thoughts would be of great benefit to him. Taoist Master Xiao isn't the first person to walk the path of Taoism on the continent of Confucian cultivators, and he definitely won't be the last. Li Xiang opened his mouth again. "Once upon a time, this Li also had the same idea. I wanted to establish a Taoist sect, raise Taoist cultivators, become the master of a country, and build a Taoist empire. Unfortunately, the Yaodai gathering pushed this Li to the bottom of the valley. Although this Li was lucky enough to obtain the lot to establish a country, the Li country's downfall made this Li completely lose the heart to contend for hegemony." "What's going on with the Yaodai gathering?" Xiao Hua's brows furrowed even tighter. What Qin Xiaoyao said before was originally unclear. Xiao Hua thought it would be enough for him to go take a look and register with his own cultivation. Who knew? It would be so troublesome. Xiao Hua couldn't help but ask, "What exactly is the Yaodai gathering like? It seems to be different every time." The Yaodai gathering that Qin Haoyue and this Li participated in was different. After all, 10 years of planning is enough for the Immortal Palace to come up with many sinister ideas to kill nascent Taoist cultivators. Even if this Li told you, it might not be useful. It might even be harmful to you. Li Xiang shook his head and said, "With Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation, it's best not to participate in it." 10 years? The Immortal Palace? Xiao Hua was shocked. He asked curiously, "Qin Xiaoyao said it's once every 5 years. How did it become 10 years? Moreover, isn't this a matter of the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent? How is it related to the Immortal Palace? Besides, as far as this Xiao knows, the Immortal Palace doesn't intervene in the specific affairs of the hidden immortal continent. Li Xiang sneered. What Taoist Master Xiao knows is just the tip of the iceberg outside the glacier. Under the glacier, how can ordinary people know the full picture of the iceberg? The hidden immortal continent is the continent of Confucian cultivators, and the immortal palace is the holy land of Confucian cultivators. If the immortal palace doesn't control the hidden immortal continent, could it be that the Lane Temple controls the hidden immortal continent? 5 years is a very long time for ordinary people, but for cultivators, it's just a blink of an eye. How can cultivators grow up? Only once every 10 years can the immortal palace harvest their energy. Xiao Hua instantly understood a little. He narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "So, this Xiao understands. The so-called Yaodai Gathering is a grand event for the immortal palace to strangle the kindling of Taoism, and the position of the state preceptor is the bait. Since that's the case, why? Yes, since you know it's the bait, why hasn't Taoist Master Xiao dispelled the idea of participating at this time?" Li Xiang said with a smile, "It's because this bait is really tempting. Of course, we can't rule out that many Taoism disciples don't know the inside story. Even this Li doesn't have any real evidence. Everything is just this Li's own speculation. Lucky thoughts, considerable expectations, unbearable curiosity, all make people overlook the potential danger." Xiao Hua nodded and sighed. "Taoist Master Xiao, have you heard of the Yaoqi Gathering?" Li Xiang suddenly asked. Xiao Hua shook his head. This Xiao is rather ignorant and inexperienced. Previously, I was concentrating on cultivation, so I really don't know about this. It's said that as long as a Confucian cultivator can cultivate to the sage realm, they can receive the invitation of Emperor Go Qian and Empress Dongming to participate in the Heavenly Bestowal Banquet. Because this Heavenly Bestowal Banquet is held at Empress Dongming's Yaoqi Pool, it's also called the Yaoqi Gathering. Li Xiang explained, participating in the Yaoqi Gathering means that the Confucian cultivator has an extraordinary status and has obtained the recognition of the Heavenly Palace. And the Yaodai Gathering imitates the Yaoqi Gathering. As long as a Taoist cultivator participates in the Yaodai Gathering, they can be considered to have obtained the recognition of Confucian cultivators, which is to say, the Heavenly Palace. This kind of idea of learning both civil and martial arts and selling them to the imperial family is actually the idea of Confucian cultivators. When it's put on the heads of Taoism cultivators, it's already changing the concept of cultivators. Li Xiang said again, "Actually, Taoist Master, think about it again. As a country's teacher, participating in the affairs of the country, isn't it the Confucian cultivator's way of entering the world? It's completely different from the emergence of our Taoism. If Taoist Master becomes the state teacher, isn't it because you've fallen into the scheme of Confucian cultivators? How can you still have time to cultivate? How can you still improve your cultivation? Of course, on the hidden immortal continent, it's forbidden to trade high-level Taoist cultivation techniques. However, in the Yaodai Gathering, there are high-level Taoist cultivation techniques as rewards. Taoist Master can certainly obtain this high-level Taoist cultivation technique, but Taoist Master will also become a delicious cake in the eyes of other Taoist cultivators. They'll constantly probe and harass you. How can Taoist Master cultivate calmly?" Li Xiang finally spoke his true thoughts. He was advising Xiao Hua to give up the idea of establishing a country. Hiss! Xiao Hua inhaled sharply. He knew that this was what Li Xiang and the imperial preceptor had seen through. This was also the overt scheme of the Immortal Palace. The brilliance of the Immortal Palace was that 1. They used the competition of the Yaodai Gathering to cut off a portion of Taoist cultivators. 2. They used the name of the imperial preceptor to assimilate a portion of Taoist cultivators. 3. In the competition between countries, Taoist cultivators would fight with Taoist cultivators. 4. They used high-level Taoist cultivation techniques as bait to once again lure Taoist cultivators to kill each other. With such heavy killing, no wonder the hidden immortal continent did not have Taoist cultivators. Different from the Dawn Rain continent, the hidden immortal continent's Taoist sects were still not flourishing. Li Xiang really was sincerely trying to dissuade Xiao Hua. Unfortunately, when he saw Xiao Hua's expression change from astonishment to calmness, he smiled bitterly again. As long as it was a cultivator, which one of them wasn't a person with a firm will, how could they change their mind based on a few words from others? It seems that Taoist Master Xiao still plans to go to the Yaodai gathering? Li Xiang asked softly. Xiao Hua nodded. Yes, I did not know that the Yaodai gathering was so particular and rashly agreed to Chongling. Since I have spoken, I cannot go back on it. I must go. Also, I said that I want to establish a sect. If I do not have the mind to move forward and have to avoid even a small Yaodai gathering, how can I stand in the world? Li Xiang shook his head slightly. Hadn't he said such bold words decades ago? Humans, even if they were cultivators, would never give up unless they hit a wall and got a big bump on their head. The Yaodai gathering is held at Yaodai Mountain. It is controlled by an organization called Star Sovereign Hall. The present master of Star Sovereign Hall should be called Kong Hongwu and is a disciple of a first-class scholarly family. This Star Sovereign Hall is said to belong to the scholarly cultivators of the hidden immortal continent, but I do not know who controls it. At the Yaodai gathering, other than the Imperial Tutor's lot, there are also some rare treasures of Yaodai Mountain. Anyone who attends the Yaodai gathering can obtain them. Every few times, Star Sovereign Hall will take out some rare treasures of the hidden immortal continent and put them on Yaodai Mountain for my sect disciples to fight over. On the surface, it looks generous, but in reality, it is to have my sect disciples kill each other. Back then, let's not talk about it. This is my impression of the Yaodai gathering. Li Xiang sighed and took out the jade-eye he had prepared long ago. He handed it to Xiao Hua and said, I know that Taoist Master is far stronger than I was back then, but Taoist Master must remember, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. You must be low-key. Back then at the Yaodai gathering, none of the cultivators who were stronger than I could get the Imperial Tutor's lot. Heh, this is my specialty. Xiao Hua took the jade-eye and answered with a smile. He did not ask more about Star Sovereign Hall and the treasures. If Li Xiang knew, he would remember it in the jade-eye. If Li Xiang did not know, it was useless to ask. Chapter 3566. In addition, Taoists shouldn't bring Lu Yi and the others. Li Xiang suggested again, their cultivation, not to mention me, even Xiao Yao can guide them. It's quite troublesome for Taoists to bring them along. Haha, good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands. Then I'll have to trouble Taoist Li. Taoist Xiao, I've learned a lot from you. It's only right for me to do something for you. Li Xiang was helpless towards Xiao Hua's clapping. After all, he was also a nascent soul cultivator. How could he teach two disciples who had just started cultivating? But it seemed that Xiao Hua seemed to enjoy it. Thus, Li Xiang had to hit the nail on the head. Taoist, remember, if something goes wrong, immediately run away. Well said. Xiao Hua smiled. I don't dare to boast about other cultivation, but in terms of running away, if I say I'm second, no one dares to say they're first. Soon after, Xiao Hua called everyone over and made some arrangements. He sat on a flying carriage pulled by a Pegasus and flew out of the black cloud ridge. Everyone shouted and respectfully sent their master off. However, Li Xiang's face was very unhappy. He almost wanted to chase after Xiao Hua and ask, where did the low-key go? The Pegasus shone brightly. Wouldn't it be discovered from far away? At this time, how could Xiao Hua still think about low-key? What he cared about was whether he could smoothly reach the Yaodai assembly. The reason why he brought Lu Yi and Wang Yifei along was not to guide them in their cultivation, but to identify the direction and help him find the so-called Jade Pavilion without taking any unnecessary detours. Li Xiang's jade eyes naturally had the location of the Yaodai assembly and the names of the countries around it. However, Li Xiang also made it clear in the jade eyes that he participated in the Yaodai assembly nearly 100 years ago. He didn't know whether these countries still existed or not. The jade eyes mentioned some taboos that Xiao Hua wanted to pay attention to. It was nothing more than keeping a low profile and being on guard. What puzzled Xiao Hua the most was that Li Xiang told him to pay special attention to Taoist cultivators. On the contrary, he didn't say much about Confucian cultivators. This Li Xiang. Xiao Hua withdrew his jade eyes and thought, I'm afraid that once bitten, twice shy. If it's Xiaoyu continent, everyone is Taoist cultivators. Killing each other is not uncommon. But in the hidden immortal continent, Taoist cultivators, after all, are in the minority. If they can join hands, they'll be together. Otherwise, they'll be alone. Wouldn't fall into the scheme of Taoist cultivators? However, just as he sat down cross-legged and was about to cultivate, a thought appeared in his mind. Oh, so that's how it is. I understand. What Li Xiang wanted to say was that the Tao sect cultivators on the hidden immortal continent had limited resources for cultivation, and these limited resources had to be obtained by the Tao sect cultivators themselves. Naturally, they had to guard against each other. Even though some Taoist cultivators practiced Taoist techniques, they were backed by Confucian cultivators and even had the support of the Immortal Palace. They were people who sold dog meat under false pretenses. Naturally, they would be ruthless to the orthodox Taoist cultivators. Taoists say it, teet teet teet, it looks like. You still don't trust this Xiao. In fact, if Li Xiang was like this, it wasn't that he didn't trust Xiao Hua. After all, Li Xiang didn't really understand Xiao Hua. Speaking up to this point, it was already very clear. If he said it too bluntly, it might directly insinuate the relationship between Xiao Hua and Li Xiang. If Xiao Hua had a suspicious heart like Qin Haoyue, wouldn't Li Xiang have made an enemy? Xiao Hua sat on the flying carriage, free and unfettered. Now, he took out the small bone that Zhu Cheng gave him. First, he looked at it carefully, then he released his soul consciousness. He took it for granted that since it was a bone, it must be a soul cultivator's bone. Xiao Hua himself was also curious as to why the Zhu family was related to soul cultivators. In fact, this was the real reason why Xiao Hua wanted to visit the Zhu family, not what Li Xiang said. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua was wrong. The small bone didn't have any reaction in his soul consciousness. Xiao Hua couldn't read anything from the bone. Oh, don't tell me. This thing isn't a bone. Xiao Hua was astonished. He then used his soul consciousness and clear eyes technique to investigate, but to no avail. Helpless, Xiao Hua opened his Dharma eye. Similarly, the bone in his Dharma eye was empty, without any trace. That's strange. Xiao Hua stroked his chin, puzzled. Don't tell me I was deceived by Zhu Cheng? Was this a scheme to transplant flowers for a tree? No, the Zhu family is afraid of the Copper Pillar State, so how could they not be afraid of me? Xiao Hua shook his head again. That's right, Buddhist sense. Suddenly, Xiao Hua had a kind of understanding in his heart. Zhu Shi was a great Confucian cultivator. If he wanted to leave behind the teachings of his ancestors, others would definitely think that Zhu Shi would use the methods of a Confucian cultivator. However, Zhu Shi did the opposite and used the secret technique of a Buddhist sect. This was definitely unexpected by others, right? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua released his Buddhist sense. Sure enough, there were some faint spots on the bone. However, with Xiao Hua's current Buddhist sense cultivation, he couldn't really see these spots. Finally, Xiao Hua sent the bone into his Niwen palace. Under the Buddhist light of the Buddha's Saraira, Xiao Hua could see clearly that there were two prophecies on the bone. The ancestral tree is like the innate qi. The family tree is like the silk of the younger generation. Damn it, Zhu Shi is a saint. How could he leave behind something so unclear? It looks symmetrical but doesn't have any charm? Xiao Hua looked at it again and again, puzzled. He couldn't help but curse. Even if that bastard Zhu Cheng made this thing public, what could he do? Humph. He wanted to make it public, but Zhu Shi was too ruthless. Even his own descendants couldn't see what was left in the bone. What heavenly book truth? It's more like the heavenly book mystery. Xiao Hua now knew how to read the heavenly book. Moreover, he had already cultivated the 5 Qis unifications. He didn't care about this heavenly book truth. He casually put the bone into his space. With a wave of his hand, a scroll appeared in his hand. He was going to read it carefully. Suddenly, a thunderous voice rang in his ears. Fellow Taoist, this humble Taoist greets you. Xiao Hua shivered and hurriedly looked around. However, he saw that in the sky, there was nothing but astral wind. There wasn't any divine sense. Fellow Taoist, can you come in for a chat? Just as Xiao Hua was puzzled, the voice impatiently sounded in Xiao Hua's ear again. Oh, it's the bone-honing Xiao Hua. Hearing this impatient voice, Xiao Hua immediately understood and hurriedly sent his divine sense into his body. Sure enough, the bone-honing Xiao Hua had already stopped practicing the Big Dipper divine fist. The golden light on his head was radiating in all directions. The yellow brilliance around his body was also glaring. In particular, the aura of desolation was even thicker. His figure was also much taller than before. Facing such a bone-honing Xiaohua, Jade Archive Xiaohua felt powerless. He helplessly cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, why did you call I here? I just want to ask you, do you still want to cultivate the light escape?" Only this bone-honing Xiaohua was so impolite to Jade Archive Xiaohua. Xiaohua was stunned. He scratched his head and asked curiously, "What do you mean, fellow Taoist? The light escape is the goal that I pursue. How can I not cultivate it?" "What the hell are you cultivating for?" Bone-honing Xiaohua's voice seemed to reverberate between heaven and earth. "You found the exquisite pagoda for the Buddha Sarira, as well as the 10,000 Buddha diagram and the Mahavirokana Buddhist edict. You found the 5 Chi Thunder and the heavenly book for the Confucian cultivator Xiaohua. You found the 9 heavens spirit origin and the little white dragon for the soul cultivator Xiaohua. You found the dragon transformation art for the dragon vein Xiaohua. You even found the blood drop paradise and the devil chi for the devil spirit cultivator Xiaohua. What did you find for me? Is it this devil blade?" While speaking, bone-honing Xiaohua waved his left hand. The devil blade that seemed to grow on his left arm flashed with a pitch-black brilliance. "Doesn't fellow Taoist have the Big Dipper Divine Fist?" Jade Archive Xiaohua asked curiously. "I remember. There is also the bone-honing technique of the Sunset Island? Damn, when did the Big Dipper Divine Fist happen? Are you going to use it for the rest of your life?" Bone-honing Xiaohua shouted angrily. "I'm cultivating the Big Dipper Divine Fist because I'm too bored and playing around. The Big Dipper Divine Fist is no longer effective." Jade Archive Xiaohua was shocked, but he understood in a flash. He nodded and said, "That's right, I overlooked this." Bone-honing Xiaohua again exclaimed in disappointment. "Also, the bone-honing technique of the Sunset Island is somewhat effective now, but you should be cultivating it. Why are you holding that bullshit scroll and reading it every day for no reason? Can that thing let you cultivate the light escape technique?" Actually, even the bone-honing technique of the Sunset Island has a time when it becomes ineffective. You should also look for a follow-up to that heavenly laws embodiment technique of yours. You can't let me be idle. Moreover, if you don't find a suitable technique, this devil blade of mine will never be removed, and you'll always have a devil hand. That? Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned and said, "What if I use the 5 Chi Righteous Thunder to help fellow Taoists temper your bones? Is that possible?" Of course it's possible to use the 5 Chi Righteous Thunder. If it's the thunder water in the space, that would be the best. Bone-honing Xiaohua saw that Jade Archive Xiaohua was very sensible, and his tone became somewhat gentle. "I understand." Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. "This thunder water is beyond I's ability to use outside the body, but I can still do it inside the body. Moreover, fellow Taoist is one with the space, so you should be able to do it. However, this thunder water is too overbearing. Is fellow Taoist sure it's possible?" Fellow Taoist is looking down on me too much." Bone-honing Xiaohua sneered proudly. The golden light around his body flourished, and the strange rune on his forehead made Jade Archive Xiaohua's heart tremble in shock. Perhaps fellow Taoist doesn't even know what the light escape technique is? Fellow Taoist knows, but I don't know? Could it be that fellow Taoist knows what I don't know? Jade Archive Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Bone-honing Xiaohua really thought too highly of himself. Fellow Taoist knows, but fellow Taoist doesn't necessarily think too much. If I don't say it, you may not realize it. Bone-honing Xiaohua's bell-like laughter rang out. -12. Chapter 3567. Bone-honing Xiaohua smiled and explained. Fellow Taoist was able to freely use the Devil Realm's concealment technique because of fellow Taoist's Big Dipper God Fist. The Big Dipper God Fist should be the Devil Realm's bone tempering technique. The Sunset Island's bone tempering technique originated from the Desolate era and should belong to the Giant Clan. The Heavenly Laws embodiment technique and the bone tempering technique you obtained from Yellow Flower Ridge should be related to the Monster Clan. However, I can't casually practice this bone tempering technique right now. I have to wait until the Sunset Island's bone tempering technique completely tempers me. I understand. Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. One light into 7 colors. 7 colors hide all things. What we need to do now is to use the 7 colors to combine into one light. To be sheltered in the light, we have to go through the 7 bone tempering techniques and use the 5 elements to change the foundation of the bones. However, the 5 elements don't seem to be able to reach 7. I don't know about this. Bone honing Xiaohua replied. I only know that only by tempering the 7 colors can I change my foundation, and fellow Taoist can be sheltered in the light. As for what the last source is, it will depend on fellow Taoist's luck. I understand. Jade Archive Xiaohua closed his eyes and pondered. His figure instantly disappeared and reappeared in front of the damaged immortal beheading stage. Looking at the rumbling thunder water, Jade Archive Xiaohua stretched out his hand, and a strand of thread-like thunder water fell from the gap of the immortal beheading stage. Then, Jade Archive Xiaohua flicked his finger, and one end of the thunder water disappeared in midair, along with Jade Archive Xiaohua's figure. It was as if Jade Archive Xiaohua was holding the thunder water. Jade Archive Xiaohua appeared in front of Bone Honing Xiaohua, and the thunder water also entered the strange rune on Bone Honing Xiaohua's forehead. Yes, it's this feeling. I like it. Bone Honing Xiaohua was overjoyed. He used the Big Dipper God Fist again and guided the thunder water around his body. Jade Archive Xiaohua was surprised. Fellow Taoist, didn't you say that the Big Dipper God Fist was already ineffective? Why are you still using it? I'm used to it, Bone Honing Xiaohua said faintly. When Xiaohua heard this, he was rather speechless. Most importantly, Bone Honing Xiaohua said with a smile, whether it is the bone honing technique of the Sunset Island or the bone honing technique of the Demon Clan of Yellow Flower Ridge, they are all boring. How can they be as impressive as the Big Dipper Magical Fist? Selling dog meat under false pretenses. Jade Archive Xiaohua secretly despised the arrogant and narcissistic Xiaohua's figure slowly disappeared. The Jade Pavilion was not a pavilion, but a mountain. It was a high peak that was extremely far away from the Black Cloud Ridge. This Jade Pavilion did not belong to any country. Because of the Jade Pavilion gathering that was held once every 10 years, all the Tao disciples on the hidden immortal continent knew about this place. This year was another decade. Many ambitious Taoism cultivators were flying towards the Jade Pavilion with their ambitions and the expectations of the Taoism kingdom. There were also some cultivators who wanted to obtain rare treasures and flew to the Jade Pavilion. This Yaodai gathering was similar to a dragon gate. The fish leaped over the dragon gate and turned into a dragon. It was very appropriate. Xian Songzi was a Taoism cultivator who had just successfully conceived a nascent soul. Currently, he was riding a snow eagle in midair with 2 boys. That snow eagle was extremely large. Its back was about 10 zhang in size. Xian Songzi's face carried an indescribable pride. He sat cross-legged behind a jade table. They also allowed that cultivator to bring Xian Songzi out of the remote and poor mountain village that Xian Songzi had long forgotten. Before that Taoist cultivator's lifespan was up, Xian Songzi had always felt that he was very fortunate to be able to walk on a path to heaven. He had a dozen so-called senior martial brothers beside him to take care of him. He also had ready-made cultivation methods and medicinal pills for his cultivation. In particular, Xian Songzi's aptitude was really excellent. He had only been a disciple of Taoism for 100 years, but his cultivation was already catching up to his senior martial brothers who had been cultivating for hundreds of years. At that time, he was already a famous cultivator in a dozen countries. Unfortunately, those happy days were gone when that Taoist cultivator failed to cultivate to the nascent soul stage and reached the end of his lifespan. First, the spiritual herbs and other things provided by the country that Xian Songzi relied on began to decrease. Then, Xian Songzi's so-called senior martial brothers gradually fell in the battle with other Taoist cultivators and Confucian cultivators. Finally, the remaining 2 or 3 senior martial brothers also left that country and went to other places in the hidden immortal continent to look for opportunities for cultivation. Xian Songzi's so-called sect was thus disbanded. However, at this time, Xin Songzi already understood that this was the fate of all Taoist cultivators in the hidden immortal continent. No one could escape. If he wanted to cultivate, then he had to find vitality stones, spiritual herbs, cultivation methods, and so on. Of course, he could also choose not to cultivate. However, as a Taoist cultivator without roots in the hidden immortal continent, he was very likely to die in the hands of Confucian cultivators one day. Perhaps his life would be worse than that of a secular person. The Taoist sect was a road of no return. Of course, it was impossible for Xin Songzi not to cultivate. His aptitude was very high. According to that Taoist cultivator, he was the only disciple who could cultivate to the nascent soul stage and become the master of a country. In the following hundreds of years, Xin Songzi suffered a lot. Not to mention the exclusion and inexplicable pursuit of the Confucian cultivators, the Taoist cultivators forced Xin Songzi to the edge of death several times in order to snatch spiritual herbs, magic weapons, and other things. Countless times, Xin Songzi regretted that he didn't enter a Confucian cultivators sect. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. After regretting, Xin Songzi could only continue to cultivate. Fortunately, Xin Songzi, the leader of the hidden immortal continent's Taoist sects, finally became pregnant. However, after becoming pregnant, Xin Songzi immediately faced two choices. He could either become a rogue cultivator and cultivate with his own strength, or he could become the master of a country and use the power of the country to support his cultivation. Xin Songzi, who had suffered a lot, chose the latter almost without hesitation, just like most of the Taoist cultivators on the hidden immortal continent. Although the strength of a rogue cultivator's nascent soul stage was very strong, it was really dangerous in the hidden immortal continent, where there were many strong Confucian cultivators. Even if he took in a few more children, he might be hunted down and killed by the sanctimonious Confucian cultivators. Of course, this choice was not made by Xin Songzi on the spur of the moment. As early as when he cultivated to the late gold core stage, some monarchs who had no backing contacted him. Many monarchs also put forward excellent conditions. However, Xin Songzi was very ambitious. He knew that once he became the master of a country, his cultivation time would be reduced, and the possibility of him being able to cultivate to the nascent soul stage would be even smaller. Therefore, Xin Songzi declined all visits and concentrated on cultivation. With limited medicinal pills and other things, he finally stepped into the nascent soul stage. As soon as Xin Songzi became pregnant, he immediately attracted the attention of various countries. More than 10 monarchs came to visit him with generous gifts. Xin Songzi naturally welcomed them one by one. After discussing one by one, he chose a country with both potential and wise monarchs to be under his control in the future. Then, he waited for several years and made some preparations to participate in the Yaodai conference. In addition to these unknown difficulties in Xin Songzi's heart, at this time, Xin Songzi was a high-spirited person. As a Taoist cultivator of the nascent soul stage, it was almost certain that he would get the lot of the master of a country in the Yaodai conference. As long as he passed this last stage, Xin Songzi could cultivate steadily and gradually develop his own power, preparing for the out-of-body realm in the future. Of course, Xin Songzi also wanted to achieve the out-of-body realm. Otherwise, he would not have painstakingly made so many arrangements. Kill. Xin Songzi's voice seemed to come from his throat, but it also seemed to come from his heart. He stretched out his hand, and several rays of light appeared from his hand. Waves of impact surged in all directions like air waves, immortal. The two boys were shocked. The impact instantly flipped them over, and their bodies floated up like fallen leaves. When they looked at Xin Songzi's hand again, the pitch-black chess piece also turned into nothingness at the same time. On the contrary, the chessboard on the table was under Xin Songzi's finger. The air waves dispersed calmly, and the chess pieces on the chessboard were not affected at all. Alas! Xin Songzi raised his hand and slightly flicked his finger. The air waves from more than 100 feet to the left immediately stagnated, and the two boys also stopped there. When Xin Songzi pulled his hand again, the two boys fell from the air and stood steadily on both sides of the table. Phew! After half a cup of tea's time, Xin Songzi poured himself a few cups of wine. Then, the two boys let out a long sigh and came to their senses with pale faces. They hurriedly knelt down and said, "Immortal, please forgive us. What have you done wrong?" Xian Songzi smiled and said, "It's all my fault. It has nothing to do with you. Get up." -12. Chapter 3568. Yes, enlightened master. The boy on the left was more quick-witted. He hurriedly stood up and picked up the jade pot on the table. He obediently poured some spiritual wine and smiled. Our cultivation is still shallow, so we still need enlightened master to give us some pointers. If we can truly become your disciples, I'm sure we won't embarrass you in the future. Haha, don't worry. Xian Songzi smiled as he picked up the jade cup. Now that I've taken over the position of Grand Tutor, I can teach my disciples legitimately. Although you've only just entered the foundation establishment stage, it's not impossible for you to become a nascent soul cultivator like me. How would we dare to compare ourselves to enlightened master? The other boy hurriedly said, "We can ask for some immortal spells and help enlightened master do some things." Haha, anything is fine. Xian Songzi nodded and was about to say something. Suddenly, he frowned and raised his eyebrows. He looked in front of him. In the blink of an eye, a five-colored aura flashed across the horizon. At that moment, the sky had just begun to brighten, so this aura appeared a little abruptly. Xian Songzi's gaze swept around, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Even when he used his divine will, he didn't find anything strange. However, just as Xian Songzi retracted his divine will, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Before Xian Songzi could channel his powers, there was a loud bang. The snow eagle, which was flying forward with its wings spread, suddenly tumbled. It was as if there was an invisible rope blocking the snow eagle's body. The snow eagle couldn't maintain its balance and lost control of its huge body. Xian Songzi was clearly caught off guard, but his expression didn't change. The moment his body was sent flying, the nascent soul in his dantian opened its eyes. It rubbed its small hands together, and a majestic aura was released from Xian Songzi's body. At the same time, Xian Songzi waved his hand again, and the table, chessboard, and other things fell into his hands. However, before Xian Songzi could put these items into his Qinkuan bag, and before he could reach out to grab the two boys who had fallen from the eagle's back, rumble, several thunderous booms descended from the sky, and a destructive aura rushed towards Xian Songzi. Vast pillar of qi. Xian Songzi was shocked, but when he felt the aura, he sneered. As a Taoist cultivator, he was more familiar with this murderous qi pillar than the Confucian cultivators. He relaxed and opened his mouth, and a small pagoda flew out. The small pagoda landed in the air, and thousands of jade talismans flashed. It let out a loud roar, and 1,000 feet of brilliance rushed out, sweeping away all the qi of heaven and earth nearby. It suddenly expanded to dozens of feet and rushed towards Xian Songzi's head. As for Xian Songzi, he kept the item in his hand into his universe bag. Two beams of light from his other hand landed on the two boys. Boom, boom, boom. More than a dozen loud sounds were heard as the vast qi pillars that were comparable to thunderbolts struck the small pagoda. The small pagoda's brilliance flashed violently as it let out a mournful cry. The pagoda that had just expanded was immediately beaten back to its original size, tumbling in the air. Not good. Xian Songzi's expression changed greatly. He didn't expect the vast qi pillars to be so powerful. Moreover, the destructive aura only rushed out of the vast qi pillars at this moment, completely enveloping Xian Songzi. Xian Songzi knew that things weren't good. He didn't dare to care about the lives of the two boys. He hurriedly rubbed his hands together, and thousands of dark red threads of light rushed into the small pagoda along with the spell. The small pagoda trembled rapidly again, and circles of shadows rushed out. Every circle of shadows produced waves of qi that soared into the sky, trying to resist the destructive aura. Xian Songzi's dermic powers surged into the small pagoda at the right time. The second wave of the vast qi pillars rushed over like a tidal wave. Xian Songzi also shouted with great spirit, "Where did this shameless scoundrel come from? Kill, kill, kill." After he said the word kill 3 times, The small pagoda rose up in response. The jade talisman floated up, and the sky was filled with flying flowers. Boom! The rumbling sounds never stopped. Humph! Xin Songzi sneered. The vast chi pillar's aura was indeed very strong, so strong that it made his heart tremble. He couldn't help but want to release the pressure of a nascent soul to resist it. However, when he saw that his natal dermic treasure was able to resist the vast chi pillars, Xin Songzi began to look down on them. He was prepared to release a trace of his divine perception to check on the two boys. After all, the two boys might not have fallen too far in such a short time. Jiji. However, just as Xin Songzi's divine perception was released, the snow eagle that was trying its best to stabilize itself in midair suddenly let out a wail. The wail was so ear-piercing that it split the sky. This? Xin Songzi was shocked again. He hurriedly looked over and saw several five-colored rainbow bridges flying over from afar in front of the snow eagle. They arrived in front of him in a flash. Xin Songzi could already see clearly that the rainbow bridges weren't formed by a cultivator's escape technique. They were sword lights formed by the five-colored chi pillars. Ambush! How could Xin Songzi not know that he was in big trouble? In his shock, he quickly retracted his divine perception and didn't dare to be distracted. He controlled his natal dermic treasure with one hand and slapped his forehead with the other. The hand of a nascent soul rushed out and grabbed at the rainbow bridges. Puff, puff, puff. Amidst the continuous rumbling sounds, Xin Songzi's nascent soul hand was shattered by the five-colored sword pillars. The roaring waves of qi covered the sky and earth. Such a huge commotion also resounded through the nearby space. At the same time that Xin Songzi's body trembled, a bloody light instantly shot into the sky. The huge snow eagle struggled slightly in the five-colored sword pillars, but it was immediately chopped into many pieces of meat. This is bad. Xin Songzi naturally knew how powerful the snow eagle was, and he also knew the power of his nascent soul hand. However, it wasn't a match for the five-colored sword pillars at all. The incoming Confucian cultivator was at least at the mid-4th level of origin energy. Just as Xin Songzi's fear rose, the pillar of qi blocked by the small pagoda in the sky changed again. Boom, boom. The pillar of qi roared, and the pressure on the small pagoda suddenly increased by several times. The light on the small pagoda was instantly extinguished, and it fell from the sky. The aura that Xin Songzi had just snorted at now revealed its hidden fangs. It broke through Xin Songzi's pressure and crashed down on Xin Songzi's body. Xin Songzi's face was ashen. Without any hesitation, a ray of light shot out from the top of his head, and a nascent soul less than a foot long rushed out. It was the nascent soul that Xin Songzi had just nurtured and hadn't condensed yet. The moment the nascent soul appeared, it immediately waved its small hand, and a ray of light flashed like a silk thread. The small pagoda once again shone brightly. Not only did it protect the nascent soul, but it also appeared from the void and covered Xin Songzi's body, whose eyes were already closed. Unfortunately, Xin Songzi had underestimated the strength of his attacker. Without waiting for Xin Songzi's nascent soul to activate the small pagoda, a five-colored sword ray appeared out of nowhere. It seemed to directly cut through the heavy pagoda, but it also seemed to pierce through the void and land on Xin Songzi's body. There were only a few pu-pu sounds, and the light on Xin Songzi's body flashed a few times. The protective treasure armor was pierced through, and Xin Songzi's body turned into minced meat in the blink of an eye. Xin Songzi's nascent soul let out a sharp cry. Its eyes were filled with anger. Even now, he still hadn't seen the attacker's true appearance, and his body had already been destroyed. Xin Songzi made a prompt decision. His nascent soul glowed with a faint divine light. He raised his hands and grabbed the small pagoda. His entire nascent soul immediately disappeared in mid-air. Xin Songzi wanted to use teleportation to escape this place and escape the clutches of the ambushers. Boom, boom, boom. More than a dozen pillars of boundless qi appeared around 1,000 feet away, completely sealing off the surrounding area. A cold voice resounded, "Suppress." Along with the voice, the pillars of righteous qi became solid, and the righteous qi condensed into a ball. There was a flash of light somewhere, and Xian Songzi's nascent soul appeared with a panicked expression. He quickly looked around and saw a scholarly general in golden battle armor appear. His face was filled with confusion because he didn't recognize this scholarly general at all. "Who are you?" Xian Songzi's voice was very sharp and filled with anger. Humph! The scholarly general didn't care at all. He opened his mouth, and a mouthful of righteous qi flew into the air. A disc fell from the sky. The pillar of righteous qi and the terrifying aura that could destroy the world came from the disc. At this moment, the scholarly general was clearly going to kill Xian Songzi's nascent soul. Damn it! Xian Songzi knew that he had encountered a scholarly cultivator who had an inexplicable hatred for Dao cultivators. This scholarly cultivator never needed a reason to attack Dao cultivators. He cursed and formed a seal with his hands. Light flashed around his body. It was clear that he was going to explode his nascent soul to take this scholarly cultivator down with him. Just at this moment, another 5-colored sword energy flashed. This sword energy completely controlled the space around Xian Songzi's nascent soul. Before Xian Songzi could form a seal, all of the origin energy disappeared. Xian Songzi's nascent soul seemed to be suppressed and couldn't move at all. The eyes of Xian Songzi's nascent soul were about to drip blood. He had cultivated for 1,000 years and was about to show his talent on the hidden immortal continent, but he was actually ambushed here. The strength of this ambusher was too terrifying. It had only been the time to drink a cup of tea, but his body was destroyed and his nascent soul was about to die. All of his blood, sweat, and tears were about to turn into water. He was really unwilling to accept this. Just as the 5-colored sword energy was about to fall and Xian Songzi's nascent soul was about to be torn apart, the sword energy suddenly turned into thousands of strands of 5-colored energy that wrapped around Xian Songzi's nascent soul like silk. At the same time, the disc fell and sucked Xian Songzi's nascent soul into it. The disc fell and turned into the size of a palm. It flew into the sky and landed in the hands of the scholarly general in golden armor. The scholarly general looked at the disc and reached out. 5 strands of energy came out from his 5 fingers and entered the disc. He then raised his hand and Xian Songzi's nascent soul came out from the disc. Hee, congratulations, Brother Wang. A tall Confucian scholar flew over on a colorful cloud. The Confucian scholar's cheekbones were prominent, and his eyes were long and slender. In his hand was a treasured sword that was about a foot long. This treasured sword reflected the rising sun and transformed into a rainbow. -12.